Mess up. Hey y'all.
That.
Hello.
Oh my gosh.
I
I don't think the people like us today, Sharice.
Oh, there's 6 people. There's 12 eyes on us. Hey y'all.
What up? What up? Oh, somebody left.
Ah.
Got
my notification this time. Shout out. What's up, Alex? Chidamacha. Did I already ask you, Chidamacha, if your birthday is October 25th?
Oh, because of 1025. I was like, why?
My mom's birthday is October 20th. Ashy. Hey, Leah.
And mine was the 14th.
Sup, Ricky? The Rickster.
Oh, is that all 5 of the people that's watching?
Right. There was something. Oh my God. Oh, 18. Whoa. Oh, see, now why I don't have my shirt.
You're going to have to ask ear doctor.
Yeah. Oh, no, we randomly got these from Kamal. Remember we
Kamal did
him? Yeah. You ain't had no larges, though. That's why we had to get our fucking shredder on. Freddy Krueger.
Sharice asked me to cut a heart into the shirt.
Oh, my arms look dainty. I appreciate that. But don't it looks like that just this shirt is everywhere. But yeah, it's you can't really see it, but this is
I promise it's hard. It's hard.
It's hard shaped.
It's hard
in the proper formation. Shout out to Layla. Layla made them. Y'all know I can't do that.
Oh my
god. Wow.
A phone.
Layla did not see you.
I did.
Can you believe it?
And I was, because what, it was nice like meeting folks in person. And then Sharice was like, "Oh yeah, Ryan was in the critical media section." I was like, "What did he look like?"
So this was your fault, Ricky, because me and Layla needed larges, and they only had extra larges.
And Ricky she don't need no goddamn
Ricky need an extra small. So you should have just been like, "I think CBS gonna need that." But no.
Listen, I know I lost some weight, but not that much. I still did.
You gotta say thank you. It's art with words. Okay, so is your name Art or some variation? Because that would be a double entendre. Elon, what's up?
Also, Elon, I thought you were supposed to email me. I was trying to. I was trying to. Why were we saying that we wanted to get in contact with you?
Because we was gonna have Elon on the show. Yeah, debrief. We wanted somebody who attended.
Yeah, but I was trying to figure out if you followed me on social media. I couldn't find you, so
Ricky said large and extra large. Ain't my fault that man cheap. Listen.
Oh, Elon said she's still traveling.
Oh, okay, all right. Safe travels, Elon. It was great to meet ya. Layla was sitting too close to the action. So I blame Sheena for looking like a super fan between her favorite.
Honestly, that decision to put that panel in that open ass room was actually really frustrating because it was very hard to hear. And so I actually had just put my stuff on the couch, and then all of a sudden the decision was made to like move everybody closer. So that's why I was where I was.
Yeah, the configuration was not the best. I'm crying that I didn't get to meet y'all at the
Ashy Knuckles.
What? I still have y'all gifts. Oh, now I'm really mad.
Also, then why didn't you just actually seek us out?
I know. Did you see us? What the heck? Bye, Elon. Why? I'm so mad. Yeah, I saw Dr. Layla, but didn't get a chance to say hi. Really?
No, Ricky told me I got my gift. Hush.
That's real ashy behavior, Ashy Knuckles. They're in St. Martin. Shout out to the homies in St. Martin. How big was the conference? I want to say there was it seemed like hundreds, maybe.
Definitely, because I think even in the Black Men Build breakout session alone, there were like 80 people.
Yeah. So I think the goal. I think their goal was 500. I think that they had around that number.
It had to be.
Yeah, overall
between the days. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So we are, because they're coming on at 4:30. Oh, so we got a lot of time to kill. So
time to kill.
Before our live section, y'all, we're just gonna talk about something. So this whole episode is about, the National Black Radical Organizing Conference. We're gonna have Musa and Two Black on. Then we're gonna bring on some comrades from Compas de la Diaspora, whose a statement I read on that first opening plenary. They're going to talk more about the organization and the work that they're doing around stopping basically DR fascism, specifically targeting Haitians and Black Dominicans.
I mean, we can pull you in, Ricky.
No, do we know how to do that? Can we?
I don't know.
Yeah, we just have to send it. You want to come on?
You want a camera?
We'll send you the link. So for life, we're just gonna kind of talk about some of our takeaways. So the first was like catching up with comrades. That was really fun. So we just shouted out a bunch of people we saw. Who else? We saw.
Well, I had not seen Phil Agnew in a long time. And we spent a lot of time together in like our younger years. At one point in time, when I was in graduate school, we were actually working to found a North Carolina Dream Defenders chapter. But the NAACP in North Carolina and in Florida were being real raggedy at the time and trying to block those things. But yeah, so it was good to see Phil. I had not seen him in person. Actually, quite a few people who like I had like previous relationships with, who I still stay connected to, but I hadn't seen in person in a while. So that was nice.
Who else? Let's see. So AK was there, obviously. Derica, we were all on that panel together.
Yeah.
That was my first time meeting Malika in person. Charles and Inez Barron, I met them. So they were on the panel on Sunday. I met them when I did a talk at Hunter College in New York. There was a lot of people there. There was just a lot of BAP, especially BAP and CMB people. So that was nice.
And we met Josh Ingram in person too. I don't know if Josh is in the chat today. I don't see him, but yeah. That was meeting some of our moderators in person. Nice. So Ricky said that she can come.
Yeah, I sent you the link. I texted you the link, Ricky. They coming on at 4:30. So hop on if you can.
So
what else?
So we went to dinner. What was the first night at an Ethiopian restaurant, which is, if y'all don't know, that's kind of me and CBS's thing. We try to find a good Ethiopian restaurant most places that we go. At this point, I think the consensus, the best one that we've had in these 6 or 7 years was
in London.
It was on the outskirts of London. But I don't know if y'all know this about me, but I really love popcorn. And so that particular Ethiopian restaurant had like fresh popcorn and coffee. It was a vibe. But anyway, the one we went to in Detroit, it was what? Us?
You mean in Indianapolis?
Oh, why did I say Detroit? Because we're in Detroit. In Indianapolis, it was us, Musa, who else came to dinner?
I cannot remember. Dartricia.
Oh yeah,
and
Dewan. And then some of the younger guys who, like some of the teenagers that were attending the conference, they came in a little bit after us, and so then we ended up sitting all together. So that was really nice.
The youth,
yes. I think it was all of their first time having Ethiopian food too. So that was also just
one clean day plate. I'm not gonna say no names. One left no crumbs, literally. One was taking the injera and filling it up like a blunt. Seriously, like setting it in there, then kind of rolling it up and taking a bite. I was like, this is very, very crazy.
But I think I like experiencing people's first times with things because they all really enjoyed the food.
Yeah,
so that was really nice. We had a good conversation.
We did, and then we got kicked out. Dude was like, we closed.
Yeah, we did get kicked out.
Layla's not about that.
I don't like sweet stuff that much. Like I like desserts that are sweet, but things that are supposed to be salty, I won't be salty. And popcorn, I want salty.
Yeah. So the other thing is like the informal conversation. So there was just like a lot of informal conversations that were happening sometimes during panels, but often, afterwards, like going to another location, transitioning to different workshops and that type of thing. So that was really nice. I had a good conversation with Ashanti, Alston, because I do a Black anarchism unit in my Black social political thought class. And I told him, oh, I teach your stuff. And, I was like, you should, zoom into the class to talk to the students, So hopefully we'll get that doing. Or excuse me, we'll do that, get that done. Talk to a whole bunch of new Africans. I got these books. Okay. So the first one, AK Akinela Umoja, Gloria Aneb House, and John Bracey, RIP, edited this book. It's a collective memoir of Robert and Mabel Williams, African American Freedom, Armed Resistance, and International Solidarity. So looking forward to this one. We're actually going to have AK at Wayne State, hopefully, about that book. Then I found this book. It's called False Nationalism, False Internationalism, Class Contradictions in the Armed Struggle. And this was from... I think they were NAPO, maybe they were MXG, but they had this book along with Harry Haywood. They had another t-shirt, like African Communist t-shirt that was like Harry Haywood, Queen Mother Moore, and then I forgot who the third person was. I think the person that wrote that book. But so that's Malcolm X grassroots movement. Yeah. So, and then what else?
I'm trying to remember. So the Fruit of Labor. What is the name of the Black Workers for Justice Center in North Carolina? So my younger brother actually does a lot of work with Black Workers for Justice at home. And so we were like just chatting up people at the tables, and I was talking to the folks that were tabling with Fruit of Labor, and they were all like, "Oh, you're a Boxy sister," so that was also nice. Like, because my brother does a lot of he cooks for them a lot and does a lot of other stuff there. So just to, I haven't been home in a while, so also just having the what do you call it? The crossover of meeting some of those folks. So that was also nice.
Ask them about that on. Candy corn's fucking disgusting. Okay. I
am 50-50 on candy corn.
So you want to go chew on a candle is what you say.
I don't mind it sometimes. Like my mama loved candy corn. And so I don't love candy corn, but I will, especially the ones that have a little bit of chocolate in it. Sometimes I will I'll eat a few pieces, but I cannot eat more than a few. Yeah.
And then the other thing is I was on the opening plenary.
Yes.
And I really appreciated a lot of what Derica had to say. I've listened to Derica a lot over the years, and it was there was a lot of different types of information that I feel like is incorporated into her practice and ideology. So she didn't just talk about abolitionism, she talked about communism and all kind of other shit. Different types of organizing for ICE. And so I appreciated her comments a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in our conversations with Two Black and Musa, but even the perspective, when we think about NBROC as a conference for organizers, I think in particular some of the comments Derica raised about how is it that we are attempting to strategize around increased forms of surveillance, and what does it mean that people who are attempting to door knock and shit like that have all of the interactions recorded via or even being mediated through Ring cameras. So I thought that was really interesting. Because this conundrum of people want to have cameras on their house because somehow it makes you feel safer, but then it's also but it's you're literally recording every aspect of your life
and other people's lives. Because there's been how many of these police cases where shit got caught on somebody else's Ring camera? Yeah.
No, I mean, when I was in South Africa, a friend of mine, when I was on fellowship, she was out for a run, and a group of guys actually attempted to abduct her, and it was through a security camera in one of the houses that one of the women saw it happening and came out and kind of created a disturbance, and then they were able to run them off. So I don't know, obviously in cases like that was a helpful thing to happen, but I do think if we're actually thinking about organizing strategies, what does it mean that everything, even the ways we're trying to get people to open up and be open to ideas and consider things are all being recorded, and how is that being used against us?
So that was good. I wasn't as much of a fan of the electoral comments, but big tent. So did you? Okay, so you still have a bunch.
Yeah. So we also CBS and I both went to the breakout panel with Musa and Margaret Kimberly on critical media or critical media literacy training. We'll probably talk about that more with Musa, but I did enjoy that panel, just thinking about like, what even Margaret talking about like her experiences of like not having any kind of like journalistic background, like what it means to like kind of, sharpen your tool of like, Glenn Ford giving her a chance to start writing, and like and also giving her chances to like fuck up and not do the best pieces and like keep honing that skill. But Musa and I also attended the Black Men Build breakout session, which I really appreciated. It was their healing circle, I guess. So like it wasn't, so I guess they have different types of circles. So when they're just the men circles, it's called a particular thing. I think when they're inclusive, it's called the Umoja circles. The circle was pretty big because there were like 70 or 80 people in the room. And so I think that we didn't quite get to go deep in the ways that they would have in other times. But something that Musa and I actually were talking about after the fact is that I really appreciate that, they have like check-in questions where they add like prompts for people to respond to. And there's like setting like kind of really clear ground rules about how to engage in the beginning. But what I would have really been interested in seeing more of is like, how do you go from some of those, like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Check-in kinds of conversations. Then to how does that translate into the kind of political work? And so something I was really curious about, and I don't know if it's any Black Men Build folks in the chat right now. But like, how is the wartime what is it? What do you call it?
Oh, their magazine.
Their magazine.
Periodical.
Yeah, like periodical. That's what it is. How is it generated? Like, is it like generated collectively as an organization? Is it used as like a study tool for the organization? So I was really interested in stuff like that. And I just would really like to see how they move from, I think, the important work of allowing Black men to have a space where they can talk about how they're feeling and have a particular kind of accountability to one another about the things that they're experiencing, but then also how does that translate into the type of work?
We did summon you. Yes. You rang. So Josh, do you want to drop in the chat? I don't know if you just heard Layla kind of what she was
musing about.
Yeah, musing, interrogating. So overall, like I would say socially, we enjoyed ourselves in terms of the conference. Like it was great to like, and Dartricia and Dewan were right across the hall from us. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
And we went to, what was that, Friday? We went to some pizzeria situation where they were showing the game. We don't give a fuck about the Pistons, but
not the Pistons. That was Saturday night.
That was Saturday?
Because it was the last day before I left.
It was Saturday. Yeah. So Saturday, sorry, not the Pistons, the Pacers. I do care about the Pistons. I live in Detroit, but we don't care about the Pacers. But it was nice to see, the bumpkins get excited. I'm just like, rowdy, but like it was like Midwest, like it wasn't like Philly where they would probably burn everything.
Because Sharice was like almost not wanting to go out because she kept saying, he was like, I don't want to be stuck in traffic. Mind you, we were walking distance from the house, like from the place where we were staying there. I was like, girl, it's the Midwest. The streets is long and wide. We're about to be stuck nowhere.
Yeah. So
but it cleared out so fast.
It really did. After the game was over, people went home. They ate the rest of their crust in the car, whatever people did.
But like a good amount of folks who were at the conference decided to go there.
100%. It was nice. And then I was harassing some folks as per usual, which is fun. And then
so this is y'all, if y'all have not met Sharice in person, you have to know that she really is exactly who she presents herself to be online. And so she just be saying shit, y'all. People who I feel like just get thrown off by like the side comments that she makes. It's just really interesting. So just know that like, if you meet her and she says some random shit to you, she just be saying shit.
I do, yeah, and that comes from if there was a person who had attended the last NBROC conference, and we apparently were having a conversation, and I asked like what they did, and they said that they were a business owner. And I was like, oh, so you're a capitalist pig. First of like, who in a serious conversation would be like, oh, you're, like, I don't give a fuck. I was just playing. But that's really stuck with that person to the point where, number one, they saw me at the conference and didn't say anything. They don't have to say anything. And secondly, they emailed me and was like, you said this in 2022 or 2023. And, I was taken aback by it or something. And I was just like, sir, I have a very sarcastic and just very blunt, like, sense of humor personality. I was probably being facetious or joking. I was also pregnant. Like, so I was just like, I apologize that you were offended by that. But just know that, and this is a blanket apology to all y'all. If I said some out of pocket shit to you at the thing, sober or otherwise, because I wasn't really drunk at the conference. I wasn't drunk at all.
No.
I was tipsy. But it's just like, I would say literally whatever comes the fuck out my mouth. And that's just the reality of the situation. And so if I offend you, sorry.
The number of people I had to say, don't pay her no mind.
And like people say that, and I say it too. I'll be like, just don't even listen to what I'm saying. I'm just saying shit. I'm just talking. So,
but I will say this though. So this is interesting because I think Sharice and I both have talked about this a lot. Like meeting folks who watch the podcast, and like honestly, we don't do the podcast for any kind of like financial gains or anything like that. So it is important to us that folks feel like this is something useful. And so I'm happy to meet people who like watch the podcast, who see it, who feel like it's useful. Always happy to do that. But like, y'all, we're just normal people. So just like just come, hey, like nice to meet you. Like, I really enjoyed the podcast, like whatever. But like we're just, normal regular people, and we appreciate anybody who appreciates the work that we are doing.
100%. Yeah, like, and so, I just, y'all, I'm just me. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. People are shocked that we have that, in particular me, that I have the same personality that I guess portray. But it's like Lila said, motherfuckers, we ain't getting paid for this shit. You think I'm making up a whole persona on the internet for free to what, entertain y'all? I don't give a fuck about your entertainment. I care about your education. So this is my actual personality.
Although a thing that Sharice really likes in people are people who are easy to laugh. So
100%.
So she might be a little concerned with the entertainment.
I just like people who are easy to laugh because it means that they're not usually assholes. Are you gonna read Josh's thing? Okay.
So Josh responded to the comment I was making earlier about wartime. Said that wartime is a study and propaganda tool distributed at all our events. We take submissions from our member leaders and collaborate with other offices. Okay, that's cool. And then we have wartime roundtables. Oh, okay, where folks from the community will attend something similar to a men's circle, but focus on that's so you do like a study group with. Oh, that's cool.
That's dope.
It is very much so. Y'all have like I want some wartime. Josh, can you send me some wartime? I want it for my like coffee table stuff. What's wrong with you?
Shit, I'm about to talk about. I didn't get to come to this one. Last time I got stuck talking to a Fed. So I took one for the team and kept him entertained and away from real organized. Oh, that is funny.
Wow, that's crazy.
Y'all are superstars. We are fucking two scrubs strapped up in a trench coat that read some books. Let Erica on. Erica's here,
we got Erica on too.
So Erica, what were your before? So we got like 7 minutes before Musa and them hop on. Like, what were your just kind of, because you were also one of the lead organizers. So what were some of your takeaways? What did you think went well? What would you kind of change for next time? Any insights you want to provide?
Yeah, I think I spoke to you this morning. I'm still kind of unpacking it because it was a lot. It was over 400 people. It was about 12 different workshops at 2 different times. There was 3 plenaries. So it was a lot. By Saturday, I didn't go out with you all to the pizza spot because I was done. I was I was like, no, I'm good. I'll take my beers and watch the game in the room. But I think for me, I said it earlier, and I've keep saying it. I think the highlight for me was the lunch. Just the visual of that. And walking past it, because I was back and forth.
Them dry ass sandwiches. Are you kidding
I'm not
me?
talking about the food. I'm talking about the visual of the lunch.
Them people choking on them dry ass sandwiches. I just like, I'm joking. No, and I loved. I thought Air Doctor did a great job DJing.
Yeah, the music, seeing the kids run back and forth.
Yes,
it was a beautiful day. Like all the different pockets of people having different conversations. And when I was walking past that, because it was a courtyard, it had all the glass, and you could see it. It was just a really nice thing to see. So I get that. I get that people, especially this being their first kind of conference, there was a lot of that socialization that I think people were kind of needing and wanting for that took place. And you've seen it during that lunchtime. So I really appreciated that.
Complaints. Absolutely. Nothing's too good for the working class.
It's not. Right.
We deserve moisturized sandwiches.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
I'm just playing, y'all.
No, but I do agree with you, Erica, about the courtyard being a space where it's just like, you could be like just the physical layout, being in all of the conference spaces, but then being able to see the space where everybody was kind of like congregating just to like, and also like having
the tent was nice.
The tent was nice and having a sufficient amount of time for lunch so that people actually could like, have because that's when we got to talk to Elon for a long time and other folks. So
yeah. No, that was great. That was nice. I think it like visually, but also like when I was talking about informal conversations, a lot of those happened in like those type of spaces. So
yeah. And I think it was different for me this time because I was involved much more. The last conference, I was just a panelist. And so in this conference, I was, helping organize it and put it together. So, I did miss a lot of those informal conversations as they were happening. So I would have liked to be more involved in that because I did, there were people I got to see in passing. And we had, for the time I was not being pulled away or having to be somewhere else, did speak. And then we went out separately that same night, Friday, to a different place, Yard House or so there was some of BAP Nashville was there, some of CMB was there, Paca was there, some of BAP New York was there. So there was a time that we did get to, Zion was asleep across 3 chairs. He was over it.
A real gift.
He had 2 cheeseburgers and went to sleep.
So let me ask a question that you can punt on if you'd like. What is your conception? Like what would you say are the sort of benefits and pitfalls of like the Big 10 approach? Or like the broad ideological diversity? Like what do you think are the sort of benefits of having that in one space and then maybe some of the drawbacks?
Yeah, I think that's what my panel led to, and probably unintentionally, but that was, ultimately where it led. Because asking the question about how do you define a Black left or how do you define ideology? And for me, in response to that was so much that there's a way that we get caught up or in trying to have a concrete definition of a thing that we lose sight of the objective. Especially if we're in a mass organization. Because in mass organizations, you could come from any kind of tendency. The objective is what really is driving the work. So when we look at things like a Big Tent or United Front, for me, ideology is not that's not the prominent question. But I do think in the course of moving towards the objective, there's logical conclusions that happen because there's struggles that occur in these spaces, like what happened on the stage. And I appreciated that because there is a differing of opinion, but it was a principal struggle. And then also with the time allowed for that, it was also a question of like, how deep do we want to get into the ideological struggle? So I do think there is a necessity for that, for some clarity, or at least in terms of seeing what that struggle could be in terms of a principal struggle, that folks don't necessarily have the same vision, so to speak, in terms of how we get to the end goal, but is the end goal the same? And I think that is the kind of question that we kind of obfuscate when we get deep into what is your ideology. And oftentimes I think much of that is so that people can box you, right? Because European Marxism was thrown out there on the stage, which is like, oh, okay, I guess. When we know that, there's different conceptions of Marxism that are not European based. But again, I think those are ways, or how people have these assumptions about anarchism based on the interactions with anarchists, right? So now that we know that you're an anarchist, we're just gonna not use you. So I think that those are ways that people kind of get confined in that question of ideology, which I was trying to convey. But I think in attempting to convey that, I walked right into that kind of struggle, ideological struggle, either way.
Okay. That's fair. Erica, what I would say about you is that you are definitely a leader. And I feel like you're much like over time, and it's something I admire about you because I do not have this quality. Like you're much more careful and thoughtful with how you say things. And I think that is a testament to being, I wouldn't say I'm unprincipled, but I'm just going to say what the fuck I got to say. But I think that when you have leadership capacity and responsibility, I really appreciate how kind of thoughtful you are in your responses. So, yeah, that's our leader. 1/3 of it.
Work in progress still. Work in progress. But yeah, I am, because there's broader, even to the point of the, again, I do think we reach logical conclusions about things. Because what I can say is I appreciate that you are so, because what tickled me, Sharice, is you made so many faces on that stage that so for me, even when I was disagreeing, like when I was hearing certain words come out, like European Marxism, it was like, don't make a face, bitch, don't make a face, don't make a face, don't make a face. Because it was like, it was something that you would react to, because I know differently. But then it's also like, how much time do we have to really dig into this, given we have 4 people on this panel, there's other questions. What's the best use of this time?
One thing about me, I'm gonna make a face, and I'm and it's like, and that's sometimes my way of letting the things roll. It's like I have registered my opinion on this. Plus, I actually can't help it. Like it just is what it is.
But I mean, I do. but I think the question about how much time do we have? I don't like that's always an interesting like conundrum, especially like when you've decided to create a conference that is about setting an agenda, creating a vision, creating a path forward. Like, I don't know. I'm not one of those people who feels like, you create a conference that has like a kind of set time agenda. But I do think that having I think it's important to have like stage setting conversations that then allow us to move to a certain place. But also, like, if the purpose of a conference or the purpose of a meeting space is to set an agenda, is to come to a common accord, then it seems like more time needs to be given to those types of things as they come up, because it's not just about like ideological purity or not, but there are some real like distinctions about what we think is important and what we think is not important, i.e. the conversation about electoralism that happened on both ends of the conference, right? Like in the opening plenary and at the end in the final plenary, right? And so I don't know, like I wonder how we continue to think about these convening spaces as important for us to like as morale boosters. And like I do think the social aspect of those things are very important. I think I've talked about this a lot, like being able to be in places where we're reminded like, oh, I'm not just alone, like wherever I am, like there are other folks who care about this shit, who are doing this shit. But then also like the actual work of agenda setting is important. And I don't know that we should always shirk that for the sake of moving on time. Right. And I know how people feel about time, but that's what the purpose of those 2 or 3 days that we get together are. And so like I wonder how we can do better about like having like things planned out so that it feels like things can keep going, but also making room for those conversations to really take shape organically.
Right.
Well, shit went time, so
I can say Black and Pride speak to this too in terms of the planning, because this was a consideration. The first conference was more plenary heavy, so more time for conversation than there was workshops. And the criticism that came from people who attended was less talking, more workshops. So even in trying to honor that, and then even to the point of the workshops, there are times in the workshop where these kind of questions do come up again, or there's moments where we can expound. So even for the times that I was able to speak to people, because I thought it was interesting, because the response to Ashanti in the plenary, people were clapping and things like that, but then leaving the plenary, people walking up and saying, I really appreciated what you had to offer, so much so that I had to watch it back, because I wasn't really, there was a lot happening that weekend anyway, so I wasn't really sure what I was and wasn't saying. But yeah, so I do think, even for what I did offer, there were people receptive, and it did give an opportunity to kind of maybe speak to it a bit more in a way that I maybe have confined myself, given that I wasn't the only person on that stage, and there was more that people had to offer as well.
So y'all, Two Black and Musa are here. I badgered them for these fucking bios, so let me read them. But I want to go a little bit off script to talk about workshops. And Musa, you already heard my rant, so I just want to get a little bit more perspective about this. So okay, so Erica's here. Erica is an impromptu guest of. They don't have a bio, but Erica. All right, Two Black is a poet, scholar, filmmaker, and organizer. He's the host of the Black Miss podcast, co-director of the amazing documentary film, The Pendleton 2, They Stood Up, and co-author of the excellent book, Laundering Black Rage, The Washing of Black Death, People, Property, and Profits. He is a member of the Black Alliance for Peace and based in Indianapolis, Indiana. Musa Springer is a cultural worker, journalist, and organizer with the Black Alliance for Peace, ATL. They are the international youth representative for Cuba's Red Barrial Afrodescendiente, a volunteer with the Walter Rodney Foundation, host of the Groundings podcast, and co-host of Revolutionary African Perspectives on WRFG 89.3.
What's wrong with you?
Okay, so I just want to start with this question about workshops. Sorry, Layla.
No,
but okay, so what are y'all? So I found. Now, granted, I didn't go to everything because these things were running concurrently. But for you all, what would you say is the kind of difference or comparison between kind of like breakout sessions and workshops? Because it seemed like some of them were still kind of conversations or panel-like. They just were kind of with more directed audiences. And so I wonder, like at an organizing conference, are there ways that like workshops can be even more like hands-on and interactive? Or were you just thinking of works like, does it matter? Am I just splitting hairs? And so I would love to hear what all your perspectives are. So let's start with Two Black, then we'll go to Musa, then Erica. Let me bring in the chair.
You're muted, Two Black.
Your mic was off. You wanted to go. Sound like you had something to say.
I was just going to offer that was some of the considerations, the difference between programs and campaigns, which is why things were split in two parts that way. And I think also we were kind of, challenging all the organizations that were a part of it to think about those differences. What is the difference? Because in terms of what a workshop or how we foreseen the workshop was moving people to ongoing work, which would be campaigns. So when, as it pertains to like the one that Austin and Kamal did, those are ongoing campaigns that both CMB and BAP are a part of, whether it's No Compromise, No Retreat, or Stop Cop City. Even the Pendleton 2 and Curbs Fest, that's an ongoing campaign. But then in terms of programmatic work, we're looking at what Max had to offer in terms of how do you begin to organize and thinking about the steps that it takes to run a program or to do programmatic work. And then what Musa and Margaret had to offer as well, looking at the process of creating media as a programmatic work. But I guess ultimately that was the question that we were asking ourselves. And I think more broadly asking folks to think about the differences between programmatic work and campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, and forgive me, there's some things like we can't say because we're, part of a collective. So there are some things that happen in meetings, and this is not a shot at anybody, but there's just some stuff that can't be said. So I'll try to split hairs. I think we ran into some challenges in terms of, because I was looking back over some old drafts of what we had lined up. And some of the challenges were, we did have 6 different organizations who were co-sponsoring. So you might have a workshop that I remember one, for instance, was originally supposed to be about liberation schools. It was just a draft, so it could have been anything, but we're just trying to come up with prompts to inspire. And then, so, let's say I reference an organization that I know has something consistent or in the pantheon of that idea, and then somebody else says, well, we have a program, and then you end up with maybe 2 or 3 organizations on that, and then now you have to coordinate to make sure that they meet together. And then I think what happened in some cases was people, because of scheduling or whatever reason, didn't quite meet, so it turned into more of an informational sometimes, and maybe not as interactive as it was intended to be, right? So like a lot of this stuff is not, I think, ideological. A lot of this stuff is really logistics and just making sure that your logistics are tight, and a lot of that is what we're still learning. So I know that happened a few times. I know people said that to me, that they're like, there was on the one about schools, they were like, our school runs every week, and then someone else was like, our school runs on the weekends. There was differences. So and I don't know if they were able to work those things out. I think if we were doing it over again, I think a rubric would be a good start, just so there's like a baseline of what you need to kind of input and what we're expecting. And then, having and just honestly, all of this would have been, a lot of the things people critique would have just been fixed if we had just started earlier, but that's neither here nor there. But but just having somebody to look over that, and I think that could have smoothed out some things, because I think there was a little bit too much onus on individuals to have to figure out their workshops. But like Erica said, we split those 2 sessions up because the goal was not to just have everybody just getting their shit off, for lack of a better term. So like, no, there are organizations that have existing campaigns, and let's like focus on that, versus like me doing a presentation on my book or something. Like, we tried to avoid that kind of thing, or or somebody doing a presentation on a pet project. It was like, let's focus specifically on what our organizations have. I think that I wasn't like Erica, I was moving around a lot. I'm sure everybody saw me running back and forth all the time, so I wasn't able to sit through anybody's workshop. I didn't even get to stay for my own workshop the entire time because I had to get up and leave. So I sat as much as I could in people's workshops, just to make sure that things were tight, or things, people had what they needed. I know in Moose's workshop, the event space didn't put the microphone in there, so we had to rush in there with mics and set that up. And a lot of this, I'll say, is just about making sure, even everything ain't gonna go right, like it's just not. So you're just like, how quickly can we respond to things when they don't go right? So I think we were able to at least get y'all something, and you didn't have to yell the entire time. But yeah, I think that was kind of the mentality on workshops. We wanted to highlight existing work because one of our objectives was to bring people into organization. So if people saw campaigns that they were interested in, then they're like, oh, I want to be a part of that. Versus if it's just someone presenting on an idea, they may not have any way to enter into that. It's just something that might be interesting. So that was why the second half was at least supposed to be on existing work that people did, because maybe you want to join this thing, maybe you want to be a part of that campaign, maybe you want to help that school, stuff like that. That was the intention behind it, at least.
That would have been helpful information. When they went through, for whatever reason, and were reading all of the workshops, it would have been helpful as they were doing that to give that context. You remember, like, it was Kamau and I think somebody else from CMB. Yeah, I can't remember.
So. That was in the rundown.
Okay. Oh, they did. I hear that.
Yeah. And it is broken down in the program. There is a little box. Yeah.
No, but I think the comment that TBS and I had about that was that announcements should be announcements, not like reading things that are in the booklet. But that's neither here nor there. But I was thinking, because there was something you said in the opening plenary about like people making these critiques of like academic spaces, but then like replicating or modeling. So, and I think, and this is not a critique of you all in terms of conference organizers, but I do think it's a critique of what do we understand conferences to be and to be about. Because I feel like this desire to think about, okay, a conference is supposed to be this like discrete place where you have this discrete amount of time, and you have like an hour and 15-minute block to do this, and then you have a transition to and I think that the conferences that I have been to over the years that I have enjoyed the most are the ones that let those things flow. Like I always think about the Dream Defenders had a Dream Defenders Congress. This is more than a decade ago. that followed the like entirely the unconference model, right? And so like there was like an opening plenary, but basically like the way the rest of the conference went was like they asked people who like to get together based on what their common interests were and develop workshops as they were there and let them play out. And so again, like I wonder about this balance between like wanting to present a certain amount of information, wanting to get you know a degree of ideological clarity about how to move forward. And then there's also just the reality that of people's times, right? Because like, yeah, like somebody said in the comments something about like a 4-day ideological, like it would be great to have more time together, but then more time means folks got to pay more money to stay in hotels longer and got to feed people longer and like all these other things. And so I don't know, like I really find conferences, however they're formed, to be like useful spaces, but there's always like just things that we could have done more, we could have done better, whatever. I don't know if Musa, you have any thoughts?
Chime in? Yeah.
Yeah, peace, y'all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First off, I'm really thankful for the conference, for the organizers. I know it takes a lot of work to bring people together and keep them fed, safe, all of those things. So I really appreciate y'all. The few moments in between running around, I got to talk with 2 Black. I could sense the stress kind of transforming into like you was just there and glad that things were kind of running smoothly, so I appreciate that. In terms of your question related to workshops, I want to just off the top say shout out to Black Men Build. Workshop was phenomenal. Like me and Layla were in there cutting up a little bit, but I really appreciated grounding with them. When I think of workshops, and this is actually kind of a criticism of myself and the workshop that I co-facilitated, I don't think of like a mini panel, you know what I mean? Like I want something hands-on, engaging activities. And from what, I was only able to facilitate one and then attend one on that Saturday. So I can't speak to all of them, but I know like for hours that we did, I wish we would have made it ourselves more engaging and more activity led, right? Have some breakout groups. It was about independent Black radical media. We didn't really have enough time to pull this together, but I actually had an idea of splitting the room into 2 groups and us literally on the spot, each group creating their own media, just to kind of put it into practice. And so I do have that criticism for myself, but also from what I've heard from others who attended, because our group who came from ATL, we actually split up to make sure we had someone in all the every workshop as possible. I think a lot of them actually did do that successfully from what I've heard. Were super engaging. And there's a tendency too, like when we all corral around this word conference, I think all of us subconsciously are like, we're at a conference. We got to act like we're at a conference, right? But then we're like Black radical organizers too. And so I could already see like the improvement in the organizing and planning from the last one to this one. Even just the location. I'm assuming that was 2 Black who pulled that location together.
Yeah.
The location was perfect. I also will say, to Erica's point, the outdoor lunch space, it seems so simple, but just having this decompressed space, Ear Doctor was doing a great job playing music. And anytime I go to a conference, it's usually the conversations in between the panels and workshops that I find the most value. And that lunch space where we were all centralized was that space for a lot of us. So yeah, I think workshops, it would be cool if there's like a submission or proposal, process and things like that. And even for my workshop, I was originally supposed to be on the workshop. Then all the stuff happened to me that doesn't need to be named. I dropped out and came back at last minute. So, there's issues that are like larger than all of us, of course, at play. So, but overall, I think it was wonderful. And I also appreciated too. Actually, I'll save that for later, but yeah, I'll yield there.
So I've made mention of the kind of electoralism. So I do want to ask a question about this to think. So like first NBROC took place in Atlanta 2 years ago, a city that has all kinds of contradictions, right? like it's a a black haven, but then it's also all these like economic disparities, all these things, right? So this conference was in Indiana, where the National Black Political Convention took place 53 years earlier. And in that, and I know that like in the opening plenary and kind of opening, there was a lot of like stage setting kind of around that particular conference. But I was looking back at the Gary Declaration. And one of the things that was like made pretty clear in that declaration was that white liberalism and electoralism in particular are not going to save us. And this is, 53 years ago, right? Yet, this year's NBROC closed with and to a lesser degree opened up with some interesting takes on electoralism. So I wanted to talk maybe about how the question of electoralism was taken up at this conference. Like, what does it mean that even in spaces that are supposed to be for us as so-called like radical Black organizers, that we're still unable to kind of think and strategize, organize beyond electoralism, right? So I just wanted to hear maybe some of you all's thoughts. And again, in our being sort of principle, this is not like
it's not a roast.
Yeah, not a roast, but I really do want to have a general conversation about what does it mean that electoralism is still figuring so prominently in what it is that we think is our responsibility as radicals, as organizers. And so I'm throwing it to all of y'all actually. So
yeah. I mean, we can peel the curtain back a bit. To the sense that was a struggle. There was a real struggle around whether or not that should exist.
Up to the day of the conference, yeah.
Including who should and shouldn't be a part of that if we are to have that conversation. And if we are having that conversation, what specifically are we wanting people to walk away with from that conversation? I mean, these are real questions because obviously every group that came together does not have the same ideas, more or less, about that question. But I do think in hindsight, because I did, as things were wrapping up, I think we just finished taking our picture and, there were still people outside and, somebody was really not happy about that particular plenary and the people that were on it, more specifically. But in the conversation that I had with them, and I find myself making sense of it for me, to the extent where I don't think there's any way for us at this point to evade the question of of elections in general, because we're so wrapped in it, from off-year elections to special elections to primary elections to general elections. It is a continuous sort of thing. So to remove ourselves from the question entirely, I think would be strategically a mistake. But I also think if we are not strategically clear on a collective approach and we're just having the conversation for conversation's sake, then we're not doing ourselves any better of a service. So for me, I think we have to think about what is it that we're trying to gain. If it is that we're going to continue saying left of the Democratic Party, but what even is that? If there's a far right, and they're right, then what are we, centrists? What does it mean to be left of the Democratic Party? And what does that mean as a base for obtaining political power? And those are the conversations I think could have or should have been a part of it. And I do think that was some of the vein of why people wanted to have those conversations. And I also think in terms of who is and isn't allowed on that stage, there is a way that people kind of get exposed in their ideas when they are surrounded by people with a clearer and sharper approach that possibly needs to be exposed in that way, because people have a base, and the way that their base understands them is not the way that we may understand them, or how we, right? So how do we broaden that, or how do we make people see what we're seeing? And I think so in those instances, it's it's the good and the bad of it. But I do think it allows for us to kind of fill in the gaps post conference to say what even was that and what were we trying to do with it.
I just want to throw some things in the mix. One is that I think I really like what you said in terms of exposing people, right, of their own accord, because otherwise you can come off like a hater.
Yeah.
But people also get tricked because everybody's at different stages of ideological development. And if for two conferences now, there has been a person who has been a speaker, right? And not everybody thinks this speaker is as odious as we do. And in fact, like people who might be more inclined to liberalism are, you know what I'm saying? And so I think that both of those, I think that that's a little bit of a tension, right? On the one hand, yes, they expose themselves as charlatans or liberals or whatever. On the other hand, it might be making a lot of sense to people, right? At different stages of their development. It's like, at what point do we actually like combat liberalism? Even when it's in like radical language. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. Secondly is like the different constituencies when it comes to voting. There's actual voters, right? There's politicians or people who run for office, and there's people who hold elective office. And so I wonder, like, how much do we represent these different like stakeholders, so to speak, or constituencies when we're talking about electoral politics?
Go ahead, Black. Go ahead.
I don't really have much on it because, again, speaking for the collective. I guess I don't, something I put in my notes when I was preparing for this. This isn't just about that panel. I think even though, you know, we're calling it the National Black Radical Organizing Conference, that term Black Radical is not necessarily pinned down. And there are differences. And I do think, you know, in terms of, we're going to do our debrief over the weekend, but I do think we could have done a better job of just highlighting those differences and laying those out. Because I do think, especially with, there was a lot of younger people there, like people in their 20s and, you know, and maybe even younger than that. We even had a baby. We had room for babies too, right? So we had childcare. And I do think that there are things that, again, I'm trying to be careful how I say this, but there are just things that when you're younger are a little bit more appealing because you haven't necessarily been in the game as much. So when someone says something about, we need horizontal leadership and lack of and criticizing hierarchy. When you're younger, you know, you're growing up in your parents' house, you got to go to college. Like, when those kind of criticisms are more appealing, right? When you're 22, you know, it's funny. Me and Kamal looked at each other and said, "Hierarchy is how you get stuff done." When that came up, and again, that's not to take a shot at anyone. I'm just saying, like, these are real differences, and I think Erica and Ajamu did do a good job when that instance came up of kind of pushing back on it, but I wish we might have facilitated an opportunity to get more at those differences that existed amongst these 6 organizations. And even in the fact of knowing that some of us have been in some of these other organizations and left and have issues, and some of us are carrying on beefs from old generations. And, you know, sometimes a lot of the younger people walk into that and they don't know any of that stuff. And I think sometimes we just allow everybody to get their kind of TED talk off a little bit and don't necessarily get at the contradictions. It doesn't mean you have to take one side or the other, but the audience should know what the contradictions are. They should be more made aware of that so they can decide the path they want to take versus, you know, if somebody's just maybe a little bit better at speaking to something that people in the crowd enjoy, then that can kind of pull them in, and they don't necessarily know what's behind it because they're young, they haven't really been in it like that, right? So I think in that sense, coming back to electoral politics, I think that's one of the easier ones where that tension can get away from us, where we're not able to really hold that down. And I think with electoral politics, I think even the question, I'm just looking back over our what we actually wrote, is there an electoral strategy for building political power? I don't know if we actually answered that question necessarily, because I think that's a fair question. Is there electoral strategy for building power? I think that's a fair question to ask, but I think it was more people speaking about their platforms in that particular one. And again, that's not a criticism of any one individual, because like I said, a lot of this for me is a logistical thing. How do you facilitate stuff to bring out these things? And if you don't, then it can kind of just go where it goes, right? So I think in that sense, we could have done better. And like Erica said, there were struggles over that panel. I won't say what I would have done or not done, but there were struggles over that panel. And I do think that we just have to do a better job of like figuring out how are we trying to inform the audience, and so they can actually figure out how they want to organize, who they want to organize with. Like, that's the objectives that we're trying to achieve here. You know, those of us who've been doing this for a while, it is what it is, you know, in terms of where we stand. But like, how do we do that for bringing people in? Because that was one of our objectives, is to bring people into the organization, is to bring people into this stuff. you know, and I think that's what we got to get better. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I'm just speaking from the perspective of a participant in the crowd, but two things that stood out. One is like age, right? There were a lot of really young people at the conference, which was very beautiful. Even when we went to dinner that first night at this Ethiopian restaurant, these 4 young Africans came and sat with us.
And where did I know we're on air, but where did y'all go? Well, like what Ethiopian restaurant? I'm just curious.
I don't remember the name, but it was not hitting at all.
Yeah, that's why I wish you would have asked me, but all right, yeah.
Oh, are you trying to say there was a better one for us to go to?
Yeah,
I think I depending. I think so.
We enjoyed ourselves.
Well, oh boy, licked his plate clean. Okay, so it must have been quite delicious.
Listen, I said I'm following wherever Dartricia takes me, and that's where Dartricia took me. So that's how 90% of my life is these days. But you know, there were these 4 young African boys at the conference. They came in, we invited them to sit with us. After talking with them, we learned they were 17, 19, 21, and 28. Mm-hmm. So my eyes lit up. I'm like, yo, can we talk to you? Like, how did you get involved? You're 19 in the AAPRP. Was it social media? What was it that brought you into this organization? Because at your age, that's like the hardest group to reach, and it's the most important group to reach. And so relating that to the electoral panel, I'm like, man, no shade at all, because I'm an African who respects my elders, but also like we really need to hear from our youth, because youth were talked about a lot on these panels, but we didn't hear from them a lot. You know what I mean? And so even a panel like that, if that is the topic, is electoralism, even adding perhaps a young, newly radicalized 19-year-old would have, you know what I mean, would have added a dynamic to it, because it was, you know, I mean, Brother Jihad is like a mentor to me, love him to death, but it was like an age demographic that was clear. And then I guess the second point, I'm always thinking dialectically about, if we're talking about one thing, what are we not talking about in that same space, right? So like Sharice and I had an exchange. I'm not gonna call it an argument, I'm calling it an exchange. But you know, we were talking about survival programs, mutual aid programs, that kind of work. And I'm like, you know, there's different things that I feel like we could have been talking about. But I do love the point, and I did not consider this before hearing you say it, that those panels give an opportunity for people to expose themselves as well. And I do think that's actually pretty valuable too.
You know, so again, not to like devolve into any kind of messiness, but I also think that, like, yes, some things expose contradictions, but then there's also, I think, ethical questions on our part about who we give stages and platforms to. Mm-hmm. Because giving stages and platforms to certain people based on, you know, like, obviously, whatever, like, we, you know, because of Black liberation media, because of other things, we all have a little, we've amassed a little following, whatever. And I do think that when you start to follow a person, you do like kind of, you take their suggestions and or their endorsements, I think, with less and less resistance over time. Yeah. Not to say like you're completely uncritical. And I think when we make decisions to showcase or platform people who we know have engaged in unethical behavior, and, you know, have questionable politics, I do think that we have a greater responsibility, because, like, I think there's a difference between having a degree of ideological diversity, mm-hmm. Being able to disagree on particular things, to show different levels of, you know, intellectual, ideological, political development. I think all those things are necessary and great, particularly, you know, to Musa's point about like having a conversation where young people are like, okay, you know, when and where are you entering, right? Like, all those things are really important. But then when it is that we know that some folks are literally charlatans, and are literally like abusing our own communities, what does it mean when we give certain people those kinds of platforms? And what does it mean for us? Because like we're tacitly endorsing those kinds of things, right? And so that's something that I think, and it's not just about this particular conference, but I think that's a conversation that we have to have in general, because I think on the one hand, we're constantly trying to do this work where we don't necessarily allow ourselves to say, okay, what our enemies want us to think is that everyone is a potential enemy, right? And everybody's a potential infiltrator. And we can't trust one another, so we can't move to a space of like organizing. And I think we do have to really fight those tendencies. But I do think that some people have proven themselves to not be worthy of certain platforms. And so I wonder also, like, just how do we navigate those in more principled and thoughtful ways?
And it's one thing. And the thing is, this is about organizations. You can still have the organization represented without having a particular individual who might be problematic, because those other people are likely going to hold a similar or same type of position. They're in the fucking organization, right? Anyway, I don't know that we need to be at this point. I appreciate that, but because like I've been quoting Cabral a lot, like right, like expose lies whenever they're told, claim no easy victories, tell no lies. And so Gerald Horne has this piece, right? This is a very quick rant, but in Black Liberation Rescue, Ben Davis and the Communist Party, Gerald Horne has this part about how Black communists or Communist Party in general was saying like fascism is coming. But then they were beefing with A. Philip Randolph. Like they were dragging this motherfucker. I read about it in my book, and I would say drag that motherfucker by his BDBs, because I don't personally like him. But Gerald's point was that if fascism is coming, is this where your energy should be focused, right? Because because for us, fascism is a time for like united fronts, right? And Randolph is kind of like a social democrat, a socialist, whatever. And so just throwing that in the mix, whereby it's like, maybe that's the dynamic, but like, what are y'all thoughts?
Yeah. Well, a few things. Even to Musa's point, one of the questions that I arrived into the space was, who's the audience? If we don't know who we're attempting to reach, then we really don't know what kind of programs or workshops or plenaries that we're trying to have, or what objectives that we're trying to have as a conference. And ultimately, we kind of had an idea that it would be predominantly youth. And it was, I think it was overwhelmingly youth.
Yeah, we were correct.
Yeah. And so much of it was, to the point of bringing them into organizations and what kind of conversation, which is why I said that last panel, that was a struggle because of the questions that we raised. Who is the audience, and what are we trying to ensure that people gain? And if we want to have this discussion, should it be the very last discussion that people leave with? So all of those things came into the struggle, so to speak, in the planning of it. But then even when we talk about the whys of why people were invited, and if we're speaking more specifically about the last panel, people were invited based on the topic, right? So even looking at who, if we're talking about elections, the idea was, well, who engages in that on a local level, on an independent level, who is trying to build something, who has ran. And so I will say, in terms of that was why names came up, because they did, right? And so even when we talk about, well, someone else from that organization could have represented, that is true, but did they run? And I guess ultimately that was what we were looking to do. Who could fill in these spaces? I do think there is, a lot of things that took place in the planning of it all, that are notes to take back in our debrief and talk through about what are we thinking about for next time, because that is the consideration that this is something that we will continue. So what is continuing this looks like, and what is continuing in the intermediate in between conferences mean, right? Which was the point, like that we have people leaving, walking away with something. But I don't disagree with some of the things that are raised. I think I believe I raised these same points about the whys. What is the purpose? Because ultimately, for everything, why are we doing this workshop? Do we need to do this workshop? Why are we having this talk? We need to have this talk. Why is this person coming? So in every instance, these were questions that were raised. But I will say, in terms of coalitions, when there's a consideration for how many organizations that were a part of it, and who wanted to ensure certain things got represented, that's the horizontalism of it all, that everybody a part of it has an equal say to push it. And I think that in terms of the planning, it was that kind of space where there was an equal kind of say. And I think if it was more or less of that, then things kind of would have looked differently in terms of mirroring an objective more clearly.
Were you gonna go, Musa? I'm sorry. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think on that, I'll try to give perspective again, just kind of with what was gathered on that panel and try to offer different perspectives, and then we can kind of take it from there. So I think in terms of who was invited, there was some positions on we don't want to push people further into their reactionary tendencies, so we should welcome them in, and not necessarily because of the individual, because maybe that individual represents a certain wing, and the goal is to see if we can bring that individual into a space like this, then that they bring a certain base, and that is a way to kind of keep them under the umbrella so they don't maybe venture out further into things that we all have issues with. That was one of the perspectives, regardless of who feels what way. That was one of the perspectives. Obviously, I think you all expressed the other side of that. But I think but I do think there's a challenge there, even though I probably align obviously more with what's been said. But I think I understand the other side, even if I may not agree, in terms of there are there are times when sometimes when we banish people, they get more clout out of that, and they run with it, and they become more of a problem in some cases than if you try to hold them under your umbrella and kind of keep them a little bit closer to the situation. That's again a perspective. So I think that was the thinking in that sense, in terms of who was invited, and trying to understand. Like, I think it was brought, I think you said CBS in terms of United Front, even though I have my criticisms of United Fronts sometimes, but even thinking about it as a United Front, if we're in this current moment, then we don't have time for certain bickering and things of that nature. I will say though, I think sometimes that kind of approach actually backfires, because you are trying to hold this big tent, and you're trying to hold all these contradictions, and these contradictions can actually end up being your downfall, because you haven't banished certain tendencies, or you haven't banished certain people or individuals, right? And I think it's challenging, because even when we think about how we plan this, I think some of us were a bit more privy to certain individuals, or where they stood, than others. And you're also trying to be principled even in your meetings, in terms of how much do you say about individuals. I mean, there were some people, I can say, I won't say who, that we did get off panels, and I'm glad we did. But but so in a meeting, you might not like an individual, or you might not like a topic, and you struggle through it in the meeting, and then you don't win every argument, right? You just don't, and you have to make a consideration: is this worth like walking away, or is this like something we have to live with, even if this might not sit well with everybody? Like, these are all the struggles that go out through the stage of what you're doing, because a lot of the conversations people are probably having, like, after a plenary we had in our meetings in some cases, or even we had after our own meetings about certain things, right? Like, you're always fighting this stuff. And I just think everyone has as someone over the weekend, when you have a lot of people coming up to you about everything and every complaint, and some very Karen like complaints, you got people coming up to you about everything, and just seeing how there's all kinds of ways that people there's all kinds of ways that people want things to go, and you're trying to find a common ground that we can unify on, while at the same time, being like, all right, there has to be a line here, right? And I think that's the tension.
I need my moderators to be moderating for the motherfucking revolution. I'm just playing. To the other, okay. One thing I'm curious about, right? I think I understand. Like, I sympathize with the argument about not making people more reactionary. I studied the Communist Party, and I see how many of those motherfuckers who got charged with white chauvinism went and became paid informants, right? So I get that. What responsibility or organizing was happening in between? Because they were on the panel. So right, because so what conversations were happening with them to the side for people who are advocating for this? What conversations were happening on the side about ideological development? What sort of, you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of that happens not, like, as we were saying, not necessarily in the workshops, not necessarily in panel, but in these other types of conversations. And so were there other types of conversations that were, I didn't observe them. Now, granted, again, like, I'm only one person. I wasn't, you know, whatever. But I wonder, like, was that a discussion as well? Like, if we are sort of reaching toward the margins of what we might consider the left and like trying to hold those people within the Big 10 or whatever it is the approach is, right? Prevent certain people from being reactionary, then what is our responsibility beyond including them, right? To ensure that ideological development is actually taking place and not just an expansion of their grift because they've got some air of legitimacy by being around us. You know what I'm saying? And that's just a general question, right?
No,
that
fair.
also might relate to like, how do we interact out generally in the space outside of the formal things that are planned?
No, I appreciate the question. Well, as one of the people who was not advocating, you know, I didn't really do much of that, but there was conversations about the Citywide Alliance that is in that area and their campaign launch that just happened, and if they were aware of that, you know, how do we get the organizations kind of in conversation if that's a possibility, because they're in that same area. And I do think that what is undeniable is that the base exists. So we could feel how we feel, but there is a local base that exists, right? That believe in that person and stand 10 toes down with that person, right? So even to the point that Black is making, are we shunning? Because is it really so much about that person or the people that are around them or the people they're able to influence? And so I think these are all questions in the aftermath as we're looking back on the utility of these plenaries, the conversations that arrived, and what we said that we set out to do objectively in between conferences or in the aftermath. I think these are all questions that we are asking, like what was that, and you know, what do we intend to do with it afterwards? Yeah.
If I can just say briefly, there's always a question of discipline, and I'm making a point, even to the fact that we started days late because many of the people in the room were not there. I was annoyed as fuck with that. I'm like, yo, I flew all the way here, get here on time. Like, it's a question of discipline. And I think that as this weekend, a lot of it was, it felt like us attempting to find our points of alignment, unity of objectives. We also have to have unity of discipline, right? Because what might be discipline to one individual could be completely different to someone who has a cult of personality around them, who is harmful, whatever it might be, right? We all have different entry points for how we envision discipline. The Panthers had people doing push-ups if they were late to a meeting, and it might look different in 2025, but I think that this question of discipline also is something we have to struggle around. And so that's something that when I'm listening to this conversation, I think that that's also a sort of a yellow flag. It's like, well, what do we mean when we say discipline if we can't even arrive at this space on time? You know what I'm saying? And so I appreciate the intention that y'all are putting into this for sure.
It's also like, I don't know, at least like there was an incident I almost had with the sound guy. If it were just me, we probably would have physically fought, right? Just being real. But but because I represent the entire conference, and like and that would have been a horrible decision. So I actually de-escalated and I walked out. He was just a cracker.
No, people, this what I was saying on my opening plenary. Y'all, we got to use every tool in our tool. Whatever. I would have been.
Yeah, but we would have had to have the conference outside or something. So they would have kicked us out of the whole room. So I'm just saying, if it was me, yeah. But I walked out. I'm just using this as an example because we do represent people more than ourselves. And And I think that in a sense, like I think that's a question in terms of discipline. Like, who are you representing when you walk in, right? Are you representing a collective of people where you have to carry yourself a certain way? It doesn't mean you can't be yourself, but you do have to, when you make a decision, you have to consider other people. So I can't hit this person as much as I'd like to, because we might not get to dinner today, right? Like that's a real thing. So, and if we don't get to dinner, then everybody's going to be mad. And then this conversation we're having, I think, much smaller critiques than we'd be having if I had hit the dude, right? Like I'm just saying that's if the whole conference could have went, could have went a shit, and we never get to do this in Indiana again and all that, right? So I'm just saying like that's an example. But even thinking about anyone else who comes up and shows up, like what are you representing? It's also an example of evaluating who you let come in, because some people don't also move with that mentality. They don't arrive with the mindset that they represent a collective. They arrive with the mindset that they represent themselves, and they might have like cult followers behind them or something, right? But they don't really represent a collective of people who have objectives and are trying to achieve certain things. So I think in that sense, we that's a way of thinking about it. Is just like I don't think some of us walk in there thinking about it in that sense, and that's part of why we do these conferences or do these convenings. We're trying to help people get that kind of discipline, in my opinion, where you're not just walking in as just because you move differently when that's what it is, you don't get to do that.
Yeah, that's really important. It's really important. Like obviously, the conference space is one thing, but it's important when we're in actual spaces where like things are where our lives might be on the line, and somebody having a knee-jerk reaction to a thing can endanger multiple people. And so being able to like, have an authentic reaction that's like this shit is one thing. But then, like you said, to the point about discipline, being able to say, okay, this is bigger than whatever my immediate emotional reaction is, and I have to make a different type of decision. That's that's what I think. We've been talking about that in a general sense in this entire conversation, whether that be how we deal with folks who we feel like are on other ends of the ideological spectrum, or whether it be some small shit where it's just like my everyday human response is I want to punch you in your face, but that is not helpful in this particular moment.
Sorry. Go ahead, Erica.
Well, I did want to say, even to the point of discipline, I think what was evident for me in the conference and how well received certain lines about horizontalism and no hierarchies was that that kind of spoke to the way that people drifted into the space with no kind of adherence to the structure that was laid out, because they didn't really feel the necessity to be. And then also I also think that speaks to some of the ways that there were people who attended there that came there with the intention of, in the middle of your shit, we about to run our own workshop, we about to do our own program in the middle, because because it happened, right? So there is a way that people, even when we talk about discipline, people who come in to these spaces don't seem to want to adhere to the discipline or the structure of the space to get the best benefit out of it that's possible, for everybody inclusive. And then you also have to think about, to your point, your reaction to that, because if you're running that workshop that just went all the way left, do you now get into it with the person that took it to the and then ruin it for everyone? Like, how do you reset the space? So I think there was a lot of, there was some of that occurred. But I do think it also speaks to the way that we see things occurring more broadly, and why certain things are more receptive to others than, because if it is that difficult to just be somewhere on time, then yeah.
I'm sorry, y'all. It'd be funny shit everywhere. Okay. I guess I should have specified this, since people can't tell I'm being sarcastic. I do not think Two Blocks should have beat no motherfucker's ass as an organizer of the conference. Okay. Jesus Christ. Okay. But when you're talking about discipline, Musa, that's what I really admired about or appreciated about BAP Atlanta's approach. Like the fact that y'all actually were like, we're going to navigate the conference strategically and intentionally, because irrespective of what's offered, like we're going to get something out of this. And I feel like that to me is a great approach. Like having strategized about how you want to approach the conference. Like I thought that was well.
Yeah, I can speak to that quickly or briefly. It's something that BAP Atlanta is pretty good at, is if we're going to some event, if we're tabling at an event, if we're doing something, we try to think ahead of how we're going to debrief, discuss, and synthesize, and then report that back to our membership. And the conference felt like a very important opportunity to do that. We brought a lot of people. We had a large majority of our active membership were there with us. And so really I have to give props to Steph, who I think, if I'm not mistaken, might be joining the show at some point today. Shout out to Steph, Taylor, Dartricia, and some others, but had the idea to be like, let's split up and make sure we can have one person in each workshop. First, like, which one do you want to go to? We don't want to force you to go to one you don't want to go to, whatever, but like, let's really try to maximize what we can get from this experience. We just flew all the way here from Atlanta. That way we can have our own debrief, right? So on Saturday, we planned our debrief, which is tonight at 6 p.m. actually. So we went in there with sort of an organized plan. Let's split up. We made sure everyone, you need to take notes. You need to sit there and you need to take notes. And then, we approached it like we approach our organizing, because it was an organizing conference, and what else are we supposed to do? And it also, I would say, it came in handy because Monday on the rap radio show, we did a review of the conference, and everyone in BAP Atlanta already had notes. We hadn't debriefed yet, but we were able to have something to refer to. And then lastly, when we have our full membership meeting, which we do on Saturdays, we then are able to present a unified, synthesized summary of the conference. That's not just us giving personal thoughts and feelings, but actually discussing horizontally, which is the buzzword these days, across the board, how we felt about the conference. And so I think that it's important for people, like Erica was just saying, some people just kind of trickle into these kind of events as individuals, but we didn't approach it as individuals. We approached it as members of an organization going to a conference, hoping to get something out of it, right? And so I would encourage folks in general, like your organizations and collectives, to approach events like that, because we even have templates. We have report back kind of templates that we can use for these things. So, and also shout out to Love I Am, who we got to meet, who we first learned about here on Black Liberation Media. It was nice to meet him and some other folks from Atlanta as well.
So I have one. So we have a couple more questions. Steph is going to hop on at 5:45. So we got maybe about 20 or so more minutes. But I just wanted to raise this. So Malele Mwanza, first, I think you said that this conversation was useless. Okay. And then you said, so, okay, but how did this free us? Well, if we had the answer to that question, I think that we would already be free, but I don't, and I, you said something about conferences being made, maybe of the academy or whatever. We are in my perspective, with Black Radical Movement, we're in a rebuilding phase. And so I think that these conferences can or are supposed to lend to that reality. And also, like, get us offline. I know we're online right now, but get us back used to meeting in person. And again, like I said, there was a lot of building. I did not like the use of networking so much, because that made it feel like neoliberal, but there were a lot of grounding. There was a lot of grounding happening. There were a lot of connections being made, a lot of people coordinating their different campaigns and their approaches. Okay, I get that. And I think that's relevant and useful. Like, are we waging our struggle? No, we're not organized enough for that. And so, like, we can shit on every single thing that people try to do, or we can do shit and then talk and reflect and have criticism and self-criticism, right? I think that is the point. So hope that helps. Now, the question that I wanted to ask is, it's about, so Derek mentioned something really interesting, and Layla gestured toward it already, about the organizing with the Ring cameras, right? But that made me think about, the conference was live streamed, right? So in this era of indictments of all different types, right, of sort of attack in a general sense on anything that even could be considered radical, what are the benefits and drawbacks of live streaming a gathering like this? And what things might we be concerned about or mindful of with that hybrid format? Because of course, accessibility is a thing, right? We wanted people to be privy to these conversations who couldn't necessarily attend the event. But again, on the other hand, there is this security, and it's not even so much infiltration, but like literally direct targeting. Like people are getting blacklisted, people are getting hemmed up, as we know, right? Hemmed up at customs, at TSA, all over the place. And so like, what should we be thinking about with respect to
that? Yeah, I think I mentioned that earlier on the morning show that was something that I didn't really consider until she said it, even though I have my own criticisms about the ring cam, because I do know that they, the police can take it with or without a warrant. They could, if they see something on your ring cam, they could just show up at your door. So it's like concerning, but I did not think about it in terms of canvassing, primarily because that is what we're trying to get people to do in this sort of post-2020 era. These last couple of years has been really hard for people to engage other people in conversation, let alone the work or the political work. So I think that what Derica had brought forward was necessary, because I never thought about that earnestly. But then also when I think about the live streaming, I think it was something that we did in the first conference, when the workshops, even though they were minimal, were not recorded or at least live streamed. I think organizations for their own purposes recorded it, their workshops, or at least the speakers, not the audience, for their own purposes. But for the most part, it wasn't live stream. And I think that's because the intention was the workshops would be where the actual conversations and the deep diving and the working through things would be occurring. And for the most part, that was able to happen more or less in the majority of the workshops. And the plenaries are, what we're doing now, just the discussions between us as organizers, that I don't think we see as much of a risk, even though all of it essentially is, or puts us in that. But I mean, even to the question of security, because I've thinking about this more and more, and even to the panel that I was on, when we talk about certain ways that we are protecting ourselves, I do think about the question of discipline as well, because I made the clip while I was there, but it's like, we're talking about security, but if I can't trust that you outside in that car ready to go when we need to, when we run it out the door because you lollygagging or you taking your time, that's a security issue, that you're not where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. And these are things that people don't really consider because of the whole technocratic aspect of it, and people trying to bury their footprints or digital footprints online while making themselves very exposed in every other aspect, especially when it comes to hierarchical leadership and not adhering to structuring, et cetera, and the question of like democratic centralism and all that. So I always think of the question of security more broadly, and I'm interested in why it gets talked about in a very narrow, specific way as it occurs to like protecting our individual selves and not so much the organization, even though we're speaking about it in the context of organizing.
Well, for me, that's the plenaries were particularly well because the cameras panned out to the whole audience. So the plenaries were actually when the majority to plurality of people who are attending the event were actually together. And that's when you can like, they do this shit. They identify like every single person. This is how they create like RICO shit. Anyway, so I do think to me, it's like, it's not like, oh no, I'm okay. It's like, it is a collective thing, right? And the way that they get organizations is they start with individuals. They start with one or two individuals and they link everybody else. That's how, anyway.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that. I think because I always go very different ways with this, like in my own head. So on one level, I'm like, everything's recorded anyway, and I just assume that when I walk into something like this. So, it's at Butler University. It's not like we were in some bunker somewhere, that we can control, and it's some liberated territory. So I just walked into it with the mentality that that's what it is. We did have security. I know some people weren't aware of it, and that was on purpose because they was embedded So I'm not going to expose what we were doing, but just know I walked through the entire detail, and I knew, and I felt confident in what they did, and even some of the changes that we made to how we did registration and how we, where people were routed and what doors people would go through. Like, that there was the security was tight, much tighter than people were aware of. And that, again, the point was not to have a bunch of people in, black suits walking around like, security. Because if we're talking about surveillance and stuff. So that was there. And I just hope people can, trust us on that. But yeah, I don't really, I don't know. I know there were definitely folks there. There was even an incident that occurred off after the conference of something that happened. I won't say the details, but that sounded like it was somebody trying to cause problems, in one of these breakouts, in terms of just trying to pit people against each other. A lot of people came back to me and didn't feel comfortable about it. We'll address that. But again, I think we have to be realistic about where we're at, and like you said, we're rebuilding, and we're not in liberated territory. And I do take that seriously. Like we're not even really in contested zones. If we're going to use the kind of Nkrumah breakdown of it, we're often in enemy territory, and they tolerate us to do certain things, for whatever reason. So we have to know we're walking into it with that. So whether we choose to record or not, like, this is already ongoing. Like part of our thinking, even locally, we probably would have even more local people there. We actually did not advertise it much locally because we have a new governor and he's like a wannabe Trump, and he's been trying to make examples out of folks. So we purposely, let the advertising happen outside. So I know there were some local people that were a bit, bothered that they didn't hear about it till late. But that, again, these things were on purpose because we did take that consideration, because this is a governor, like the last governor, all of these people are pigs. But I'm just saying, how it is that first year, they're trying to make examples. They're trying to, throw their weight around, and that was considered, right? Like we didn't call any media locally, because they're not going to tell the story. Now, if we were just doing Buy Black or something, that's different. But we purposely didn't even call any media. I have somebody that works at a news channel. I was like, don't come, like, just because we didn't want that. Now we can reach out to some media, maybe do something about what happened that weren't there. We did have some media from out of town, but we didn't have any local media. So there were considerations taken. So it's not that again, that's why I said I'm kind of split. Like there are precautions you need to do, but then there's also just the reality of the world that we're in and the situation that we're in. And you have to deal with it as that, and not as a situation where, like, we're in some like utopia and then somebody can infiltrate it. It's like, no, you're at Butler University, which is help trying to gentrify a neighborhood just right down the street. Like you're in Indiana, what I'm saying? So like some of that's just the reality of what we were facing. And I think there's also a propaganda challenge in terms of, you want the conference to be able to echo out beyond who was just there. You want people to, the what they call it, FOMO or whatever. You want people to feel like, I should have been there. Like, that's not just to create clout, but you want people to want to look into it more. So even when we actually reached full registration, for the most part, I was like, well, we still need to do some promotion because we need people to feel like this is something that they should want to be at, that this is something they should want to follow. Like that is part of your propaganda angle that you're trying to push beyond just the 400 or 500 people that might show up. That's how you bring more people into what you're doing, right? So like, these are all things that were considered, and I think that was part of why we went with recording the convening or the plenaries, but not necessarily all the workshops and things of that nature. I do to hear you on in terms of maybe not showing the crowd. I think we maybe didn't need to do that. I wasn't actually aware that we were. I thought we just had multiple camera angles. But in terms of just showing the convenings, I think if we just stuck to the talent on stage, I think that's a fair compromise to all the different challenges that we face.
Yeah, I also want to shout out ZZ Lion, for sure. I think there was don't even
wait, was it Zephyr? Was
no,
that
don't even do it. Shout out ZZ. I think this question of security is interesting to me because so much of the side conversation, even little comments made here and there on the panel, I think Sharice commented something about like the underground work and all that. Something that Jihad Abdul-Bami always stresses is that when we think of the BLA and the BPP, the Black Liberation Army and Black Panther Party, the BLA was a distinct formation for a reason, right? Like this was not a porous border where there's people going back and forth between these two formations, right? One of them had a more mass public appeal for a specific purpose, and the other one was separated and distinct because of their underground activity. And so I don't know, sometimes I think people expect 400 of us coming into one city, we gotta like pull out the guns. You know what I mean? I'm like, I think so the security question is super important. I appreciated what Derica said about the Ring cameras and canvassing, and you're talking to people through a Ring camera. That's wild. And like in my canvassing experience, I haven't experienced that, but I could imagine it. So I think like the conference did as much as they could. In my opinion, I felt safe. I felt like security precautions and mitigations were in place that were possible, while at the same time, as Two Black said, we need mass appeal for the stated objectives and purposes of this conference.
So I actually was interested in a quick follow-up because you all mentioned that there was like a direct targeting of trying to get younger organizers. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to maybe just hear a little bit more about maybe, I don't know, not even necessarily the strategy for targeting, but in thinking about like the importance. And when I say young, I'm, I think Musa, you might still be in the global youth category, but I think the rest of us are.
In Cuba, you're youth until you turn like 40. Okay, so I still got some more years. All right.
But like that was something that we've already mentioned, obviously, that we had a brief conversation with some of the young folks that we went to dinner with. But I think Two Black, you also mentioned that there was a particular strategy around targeting young folks. So I just wanted to maybe end on in this roundtable kind of conversation about the conference with the importance of thinking about what, like when I say youth, I mean like the teenagers, like the young 20s actually really have to contribute in these spaces, and maybe some of what y'all were thinking in terms of targeting the young folks to attend.
And also, sorry, I don't think there was anybody under like 30 on any of the panel. I could be wrong about that, but it was mostly us aging, whatever. But I wonder also like what the strategy behind that was, having like older folks as the kind of presenters, if you will, the facilitators, and then younger people attending.
Well, I was gonna say, just for clarity, I don't know that there was a targeting of the youth. I think it was a question in terms of the planning. What could we expect? Who would be hungry for a conference like this? And thinking about, well, if we are thinking that it is going to be majority youth, how should it be planned out? In terms of the speakers, I wish I could say that there was more thought put into it, other than what is the topic and what do we want to come out with, and who would be the best people to see that through. So many of the names that were picked came out of that kind of thinking. I want to say Roger is under 30, but that would be it.
I know where time is limited. I think we concluded, we had a list, it's on one of our sheets, in terms of what the demographics we thought were going to come, and also just kind of matching up with who we already had access to, whether that's through this channel or our email list that we already had, the people in our organizations. And it was actually not that hard to market this. Like, I thought marketing was going to be harder. It wasn't that hard, because I do think there's an appetite. So for all the people who say, well, we just conference in the conference, those are people usually have been to too many conferences, and maybe you've ran your course, but you don't really hear that from somebody that's 22 years old, because particularly, and I can say this specifically as someone from Indiana, we don't get this kind of shit. Nobody wants to come here. Like, this is not a favorite of anybody's, in terms of where they want to vacation or chill. So I know people specifically from here, even in their 30s, who were very invigorated by this, because you usually have to go online, or you got to go up to Chicago, or you got to travel somewhere else. And that was one of the other things, just like it being somewhere that didn't really make sense to a lot of folks. Like, why are we going to Indiana? There are strategic reasons for that, but we don't have time to get into all that. But I'm just saying, like, some of it was, I think, again, we talk a lot of trash about our youth and the young adults, but they are yearning for answers. They do want to understand. They do want to get involved, and we can call them reactionary or whatever, but you have to make offerings to them. And I think that was, in terms of, if we did think about it at all, it was like making this being an offering. I know that was maybe more of our local kind of objectives, in terms of this being an offering, and also drawing a line to some extent from some of the more petty bourgeois things that tend to happen, at least in this city, that do not promote this kind of politics. So all they get exposed to is to buy black, or to just do liberal shit. There's not really anything else that pops up, right? So this is something that we can offer, right? So I think that's how I was thinking about it, and some of us more so involved in like local Pendleton 2 work, we're thinking about it. But I think as a conference, yeah, like Erica said, we were trying to figure out who's actually, I guess, competent on the topic in many ways, and those are the names that came up for the most part.
Something that actually might be really interesting for like an actual workshop or breakout session in the future in thinking about youth is like the what do you call it? Like the mechanics of transitioning, right? Like actually what does it actually mean to like bring young people into an organization and then push them to positions where they actually move into decision making?
Oh, that transitioning.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? No, anyway, go.
No, because I think what happens. I think with a lot of youth organizers is like got a lot of people. People celebrate, like, give lip service to young organizers because they have energy, because they have don't have as much to lose. They're willing to do all these things. But then I think what happens, because so many of our older folks have been burned by things that have happened, then a lot of that energy and potential goes to waste, because people are afraid to really let go of the reins, even as much as they know that needs to happen. And so when I think about that as a workshop, that's as much about transitioning the young people in as it is about like creating a mindset for the older folks that lets them know, like, hey, like some of these things you gotta let the reins go on, right? Like, and so I don't know, that's just a way of maybe rounding out this conversation. Like that might be something really to think about for the future.
Mm-hmm. Erica, you got the last word, unless Two Black got something too.
Oh no! I was just going to say, even in terms of that was some of the conversation that took place in the Curve Fest for Political Prisoners workshop. Like, why does it even exist? Because for however long, everyone see Brother Shep there. Brother Shep been down since how many decades now? So what does it mean to bring newer people in? But then also to the point of the being energized, I think because the youth is so energized, there is sort of like a dismay of the need for development, and that development is a process, and that it's not something that happens after a couple of sessions or talking to elders. It is a process, and a lot of it is allowing for I guess the youth allowing for them to go out and make the mistake and then come back and receive the criticism and then go back out and make the mistake and come, but just learning through that process. And so I do think that even in terms of what was said as women, right? I think all of it, whether women, man, youth, others, like the development needs to be implemented, and not so much because for the sake of them being youth or the sake of them not being a man, because that ensures that this is a continuous process, and not something that just stops with a leader.
If I could just say,
go
I just want to say briefly, because I got to hop in a second. My favorite part of the entire conference was getting to see the Pendleton 2 documentary again. And just as a filmmaker to another, I want to continue to give Two Black and King Trill as many props for that as possible, because it's a phenomenal documentary. And I love that we had a room full of people quiet and attentively watching it, move to tears by the end of it. So I just wanted to say that real quick before I hop in a second.
Yes.
And yet,
Two Black. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, to that point, as we talk, for those who did see the film, and I very, very quick synopsis because we have to get off here, but it's two political prisoners here in Indiana. We call the Pendleton 2. who received over 200 plus years for saving another prisoner's life when he was being beaten by the Klan, who were calling themselves guards in that moment at Pendleton Prison. They're still locked up to this day. So we made a documentary on that. I hope I dropped it. I don't have access to the chat, but I dropped it in our private chat. And one of them has a clip.
But it's broken, so I don't know if it'll work. Can people click on it and let me know? Keep going. I'm sorry.
No problem. One of the clemency hearing coming up on next Tuesday, on June 10th. So we're trying to collect as many signatures as we can to turn into the parole board to demonstrate how much support they have on the outside. So people, it's already, if you can't get it in the chat, it's actually on the post under Black Liberation Media. You can click on it on there as well. So it's already been posted, but you can just fill that out.
YouTube show and put it in our show notes too.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all so much for being here for the conversation. I know you're going to have a more extensive and in-depth debrief, and we look forward to what comes out of that for in the next organizing conference. It was great to speak with all of you. Appreciate your insights as always.
And for all your work.
And for all your work, your hard work, organizing your workshops or the whole conference. Everything. So
you know, for your discipline to not fight the tech guy.
Yeah, for your discipline to not fight dude. Erica, your discipline on the stage. You see your discipline. No. Being in Atlanta, etc. All right, y'all.
We thank y'all.
Bye-bye.
All right. I appreciate it.
And now we have another conversation. So as I mentioned, for those of you who saw either in person or on the live stream, the first plenary, toward the end, I read a statement from Compas de la Diaspora about the situation of Haitians and Black Dominicans, dark-skinned Dominicans in the DR and the rising fascism. And so we're going to drop a link in the chat to their, to the kind of Instagram that is, what is it called again? The infographics of the statement that I read. But we also are going to have a conversation with Steph, who is in Compas de la Diaspora, but also a member of BAP Atlanta. So we're going to bring Steph on. Hey, Steph.
Hey, y'all. Peace.
All right, so let me just quickly read their bio, then we're going to hop right in. So Steph is a Black, queer, non-binary organizer, researcher, and comrade. They are based in Atlanta, Georgia, where they've been organizing locally with the Black Alliance for Peace since April 2024. As well as with the BAP Haiti Americas team as of recently this year. They are also a longtime member of Compas de la Diaspora, aka Comrades of the Diaspora. All their work has been dedicated to addressing and amplifying the interconnected struggles of African/Black folks in the Americas, particularly around the struggles faced on the island of Haiti, the side of which is recognized today as the Dominican Republic. So welcome, Steph, and thank you so much for being here.
Yes. Thank you. Thank y'all for having me.
Of course.
Thank you. So I think a good way to just get started is by giving the audience a sense of what Compas de la Diaspora is, how you all came to be, what are some of your major sort of missions or initiatives, and and just what do we need to know about the organization?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yes, of course. I'll get into that. I wrote the intro so fast. Also, Black, African, I'm from ancestors, everyone from the African continent, and then, but traceable history and ancestor immediate family is from the island of Haiti. I just I forgot to add that Pan-Africanist, all of that comes with So to get into the question, so Compas, what is Compas? Y'all should know that we are a revolutionary anti-imperialist collective of Dominicans in the US that has grown over the last 5 years. So pretty recent, our formation. And our goal is the liberation of Dominican Republic, Haiti, and its working class diasporas from the historical and ongoing effects of capitalism on our island and in our communities. And our work consists of popular education, as well as developing and supporting campaigns on the island and diaspora. As internationalists, we are invested in the anti-imperialist struggles of the Haitian community, and we are committed to building Haitian-Dominican solidarity in order to confront the Dominican and Haitian capitalist elites that control political power and wealth on the entire island, shared by these two semi-independent Caribbean nations. And so during this process of our growth and our interconnected struggles and comradeship, during this process, we've built close ties to comrades from MST, the movement for Movimiento Socialista de Trabajadores, movement for socialist workers in the Dominican Republic, and Haitianos RD, Haitians RD is República Dominicana, so Haitians Dominican Republic, and via our shared dialogue, study, and struggle. Yeah. So just to add, we also strive to build solidarity with Indigenous people in the US and abroad who are resisting imperialism and colonialisms, including the Puerto Rican people who fight for their independence, as well as Palestinian people in their struggle against apartheid and Zionism. And lastly, as a collective, we want to contribute to rebuild the Dominican left abroad and the US left by creating unity among revolutionaries based on principled, internationalist, anti-capitalist political program. And so among our many tasks of like building working class anti-fascist committees, revolutionary, and contributing to revolutionary collectives and organizations.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Y'all, that's a tall order.
Ain't it? All right. That's why we needed it for the conference.
Yeah, right, exactly. Then you so Steph, what is the current situation for Haitians and dark-skinned Dominicans in the DR? Like, we know that there's a long, long history of violence against and repression of Haitians. So what influenced the current context and the current, the kind of intensification of that attack in this moment?
Yeah. So yes, to y'all's point, the history and violence against Haitians, dark-skinned Dominicans, Black people, including Indigenous people on the island, has had a very long trajectory. I mean, we could go as far back, honestly, to answer this question, I was like, we go as far back as 1492, even before then, you know, where last year marked 532 years since European colonizers first appeared on the shores of the island of Haiti, unleashing horrors upon peoples of the world, genocides, enslavement, ecocides, capitalism, fascism, all of it. And this history of violence and repression on the island has been just a really longstanding testament of the Spanish-French colonialism, white supremacy, slavery, and capitalism. And as I'm familiar with both of y'all's work, specifically as maybe you both have spoken about it in different times and moments, as the U.S. has invaded both countries on the island dating back to 1915, 1916. And there's long-standing imperialist occupations in both countries. And so I know that BAP, Haiti America's team, and yourself, like I said, yourselves have written and talked and have done a lot of work to highlight this and amplify that history. So when speaking to current attacks, the situation has become more acute over the years. The racism and anti-Haitian racism were at the core of the nation-building project. So what is happening now is not new. And the current president, Abinader, is following in the footsteps of his predecessors, other presidents named Balaguer, Leonel Fernandez, and Danilo Medina, who at one point or another adopted racist laws and decrees. Leonel Fernandez, for example, enacted one of the most reactionary constitutions in the region, banning abortion, same-sex relationships, and prohibiting the children of people of Haitian origin from acquiring Dominican citizenship. That constitution from 2010 was the blueprint to the racist constitutional tribunal decree known as La Sentencia, the sentencing, that stripped thousands of Dominicans of Haitian descent of their Dominican citizenship. And when I mean like thousands, like this decree, this racist decree, it stripped back citizenship back to 1929. So that is like, if not more, 4 generations, if not more, of families who have lived, worked, and died in the Dominican Republic. And so what these conservative politicians have in common is their commitment to privatization via neoliberal policies while playing a subservient role to US imperialism. And, you know, we have to ask why now. You know, this is like cranking up. It's pretty, it's only heightening. Like many of the other, the militarization, the violence is only heightening. And basically, this is a ruling class attack on working class people in popular sectors. Dominicans of Haitian descent and Haitian migrants who have been mobilizing for quite some time gained some political clout. who have been mobilizing for quite some time have gained political clout. Specifically, the case of Yin and Bosico, girls from the Dominican, this was a case in 2005 where there was a turning point in the struggle for basic democratic rights, and the Dominican ruling class lost this case at the Inter-American Court for Human Rights, which ruled in favor of these two Dominican minors who couldn't attend school because they were of Haitian origin. So this is in 2005. And then we have the late, it goes without mentioning, the late Sonia Pierre, woman of Dominican of Haitian descent, who has now passed, and others who have led this important struggle. Particularly another struggle is that of the sugarcane workers who fight for their hard-earned pensions, who have fought and fight for their hard-earned pensions. And as important is the struggle of denationalized Dominicans led by a movement called Reconocido, recognized, by Ana Belique, Elena Lorac, who I am in close, Compas is in close relationship with as well. All of these struggles have forced the Dominican state, which represents capitalist, foreign-born and Dominican-born, the oppressive nature of the state. The naked repression, which has always been there, but is more widespread as a reaction to all of these struggles. And I just wanted to shortly highlight the plight on the struggle of the sugarcane workers. This is something like these elders, now elders, are fighting for their pension that the Dominican government is not paying them and will not pay them. This is a struggle that has gone on for several years, and it goes back, dating back almost as far as 1929 to different contracts that were made by Haitian capitalist exploitive presidents at that time, puppet presidents, for Dominican workers to come for Haitian workers to come to the Dominican Republic to build up to what we see now of what the Dominican Republic is. And so that is a really important struggle and fight, along with a lot of the others that I had mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, the DR is such an interesting place. And I mean, particularly as it relates to the long history of anti-blackness, but also like Blackness as it relates to particular forms of labor, right? And in sugarcane plantation in particular, because of its connection to the history of slavery and the way that to Blackness. Like I've said this before on the show, but I just remember my own experiences being like teaching English on Bates outside of the center of Santo Domingo, and like just all of the misinformation about how those communities were comprised, like who are the people that live in those communities, right? And what is their relationship to the state? But that's for another conversation for the other day. So I wanted to hear maybe you talk a little bit more about the particular work that is coming out of the petition that Sharice read at NBROC, and perhaps maybe what some of the responses, be they supportive or negative, that you've been getting. I know, I've mentioned this before on the show. I haven't been back to the DR in more than 20 years at this point, and I don't necessarily see myself going. But I am happy to see more and more, organizations forming, both in the US and in the DR, thinking about a lot of these issues. And so I wanted to hear maybe what you all's organizational responses have been, and what you've heard, and how you are moving forward with the particular petition that was circulated at the conference this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. One, good for you. Don't go back. I unfortunately, it hasn't been that long for me, but it has been a few years now that I have not gone back. And if I do, it's for clear intentions and purposes. But yeah, no. I second, support, and hope all who are listening and who listen later on follow suit. I did want to thank you so much, Sharice, and I shall mention it again for reading the statement out loud. But I did want to make a quick revision to our statement, and I'm not sure if it's been posted on our Instagram social just yet. But in preparing this, for our conversation, I wanted to, because in the statement we had said, which was something that garnered a lot of reactions, was that the father, the Loria Jean-Pierre, who passed, their father was and the newborn baby were deported short after her death. And so I just wanted to add in a quick revision of what I know of today to be true. And so what is said and has been reported on an article, and I can share that with you all. A few minutes after giving birth, Loria, she bled to death, and police authorities present at the scene detained the father and the newborn and handed them over to immigration agents for deportation. Following the mother's birth, they ordered the house to be kept locked up with the body inside, prohibiting any approach, and no medical examiner was willing to go to certify the death. It was the neighbors who bravely and courageously announced Jean-Pierre's death through a video and ensured a speedy burial, not without fear of reprisals. So the baby was not deported, and I believe the father handed the baby over to family members and community. And but as for the father, there's no update, which is alarming to say. So I don't know if he could very possibly be in a in a cell locked up right now, or surviving. So I just wanted to give that update, and I wanted to also say that when you'd read the statement out loud, I actually stepped out, but my comrade who was also there was able to watch and actually catch the reactions. We made a short video clip of like the room's reaction to it, and reading the statement out loud. And so I'll share their answer to the question, and the reaction was great. Many people were not aware of the situation at all, while others were not aware of the particular details of the last offensive, of this last offense. We were able to connect with organizers and collectives from around the country and build with other comrades. And speaking to me for the connections, in my response, the connections we made, it was one word to describe it, one way of putting it was igniting. And more than ever, the solidarity, unity, and recognition that others are informed of our interconnected struggles, and that we are more than ever growing stronger in our efforts to combat and confront the war being waged on our communities. So again, Dr. CBS, I'm really happy to have this opportunity to thank you again. And by sharing the statement that our comrades worked on, it wasn't just myself and the comrade who were at the conference, but our comrades collectively. And support from comrades back on the island in a really short amount of time. But it's a resounding call and alarm for us to continue this fight and struggle collectively. And so the connections made include a long list of amazing Black radical organizers willing to join the fight, willing to work collectively on direct actions, and continuing to learn together. So on behalf of the rest of the comrades and the anti-racist, anti-imperialist struggle on the island, just thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course, it was my pleasure, and it wasn't only because I didn't have anything to say. I don't like that. Like I got you to say, but no, I was happy to share.
The most to say.
Yeah, right. No, I was happy to share, and I'm happy to continue to share. I'm following y'all on Instagram, on social media. I'm happy to continue to share. Okay, so you mentioned positive responses. However, a comrade who attended the conference posted like the part of the video where I'm reading the statement on Twitter, right? So she posted on Twitter and was immediately attacked by like vicious trolls. And it seems like maybe some were bots, but it seems like maybe some were not. Rimshot. Okay, appreciate that little giggle. It wasn't that funny, but no, but it seemed like there were actual people, and you were saying things like, you know, we don't want Black Americans or Haitians here. Bring them to let them go to the United States. They're like, Black Dominicans, you mean Haitians. So it's like, it's unthinkable that Dominicans can be Black as a pit from pole to pole, no matter what color they are, no matter how nappy their hair is, they're not Black.
And this was also linked to Musa's little comment. The DR and the ADOS FBA connection is definitely there.
Yes. Yes. And so it was, it was pretty bad. And so I just wonder, like, you all face this. It seems to me like you all face this all the time. Manny had shared a video where he was in physical altercations with some of these Dominican fascists when he was there a few weeks ago. How do you deal with the negative backlash, and what have been some of the real world consequences? Because I imagine it's not just online.
Yeah, no, it's not online. These folks are crazy, actually. Dangerous, more so. Dangerous, very dangerous people. Yeah, I mean, I had screenshots pulled up. I didn't know what we was finna get into how in this conversation. I was willing to pull those screenshots up.
Yeah, you can share. Is this one's a Manny?
This is I screenshot it because I know the comrade who posted this, who posted the statement. I'm planning on reaching out to them.
Oh, okay.
And so I do know who the comrade was who posted the video, and like her, like them, and many others. Yeah, I have the screenshots, but I think the screenshots show just how crucial and important, one, this work is, and two, the work needing to be done. A lot of things, two very big things that were addressed in the conference. And so the work needing to be done, the unity, learning about these interconnected struggles and how it's happening, because yeah, you do. Those were two main comments. Black Dominicans, you mean Haitians? And particularly the comment, there was one that was like, great, yeah, boycott. We don't want you. We don't want African Americans. We don't want Black people traveling here. So this is great. Yeah, continue to do what you do. We don't want you here like those comments. Those are particularly the reasons why, and those are, not to say that this is that those words are something lesser to consider, but I don't know. Yes, bots, but there are also people like literally threatening people's lives. And I haven't been able to read all of the comments, but there are literally people like threatening people's lives. Like, I know, like right now, my face, I other comrades for security purposes cannot show their face. I cannot say their names. I try to be as discreet and as little details as possible, because it is very serious. And it's been tough, continues to be tough. And I think that, I mean, it's the reason to unite and fight in solidarity, and it lies in those comments. But like you mentioned, folks speaking out about what's happening, if you are speaking out about anything that happens in DR, like if you're either a Dominican on the island or a Dominican, a person on the island speaking out against DR, it's like you're a traitor. You're named a traitor to your country. And there people are faced with racist and fascist backlash, trolling, doxing, very similar words, very similar things happening to folks here in current day in the US. And so as a result, and this is all as a result of centuries of indoctrination, dictatorships, repression, and anti-Black propaganda meant to dehumanize, divide, and distract the island's collective people from uniting against the real oppressors. In particular, going back to the Trujillo dictatorship, and his, in particular, the Trujillo dictatorship, back then, it was an assassination, imprisonment, and disappearance. Today, it is still so, but more technological, covert, liberal, and status quo complicit ways. So it's similar attacks to Zionist movements here, and coordinated with those kind of networks of racist nationalist trolls, using spear campaigns and taking pictures of folks. I know several comrades who pictures have been shared, whose people will go into Zooms and record folks in the Zooms, and then post it on their socials and post it on Twitter, saying these are the people, this is who we need to target. And I mean, they be working fast. They ain't got nothing better. I don't know what they doing. But they truly, they will put your face, your pictures, and spread it and make sure. And to speak to my comrade, who was like, there was an action in a solidarity action last year in October in New York, and it was attacked by Dominican far right nationalists living in New York. They bought a knife. There's a picture of a comrade of mine with, you could see, by, I don't know, protection of ancestors, something like, he was aiming to stab him in the ribs, in the rib cage, and there's actual footage of this and a picture of this. And it's also similar attacks. Another action that happened with the murder of George Floyd. Dominican activists and Dominican comrades had done a solidarity action, and they had posted about it, telling people to come out. It's a peaceful protest, and the nationalists, Nazis, just ran, just like they were there, and Dominican military and cops ended up arresting the protesters, the people who were there for peaceful protesting. They ended up getting arrested, weren't told why they were detained and held for quite some time. There was no protection. And most recently, in just last month, there was an attack and a siege on the sugarcane workers who were part of a march, a solidarity march for 60 years of the April Revolution, fighting off U.S. imperialists who had occupied the island in 1965. And there's videos. The thing is that there's videos to see, like there's video footage of people attacking people. The violence is caught on tape. So I would say that how the ways that we fight this is by doing exactly what we're doing now. One of them is, starting with the conference, the National Black Radical Organizing Conference, sharing information, studying, learning, educating, and making the connections, and sharing it, having our comrades share it on other platforms. And then we organize to materially support each other in the face of all the obstacles towards liberation. But mainly it's been some of the reasons I think why some of this information has not come out as much is because we're also like, a lot of the actions we do are direct actions or things that we plan. We can't really circulate too much. It's really close knit. It's really like we have to tell a few days before because of the because they'll show up, and it is dangerous. Like I'm telling you, they show up with knives. And similar fascist and tactics and violent tactics that are used here in the U.S. are used on comrades on the island, and then those who supporting them from the belly of the beast, this Western hellhole.
No, thank you for sharing that. Obviously, like the amount of, I mean, we were having you were on towards the end. We were having the conversation about security and thinking seriously about like what that means in terms of demonstrations. But I also want to respond to just a couple of, I don't know if Lion's Time Baby is serious or not, but these comments about the majority of Dominicans have European descent and the majority of Haitians have African descent. First of all, it's
the whole thing was a plantation.
Yeah. So this is the thing. People think about the Caribbean in general as ethnically, racially Black African, right? Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico are also in the Caribbean. They still have that same history, and a part of like spreading these stories about the fact that the majority of Dominicans have European descent is really sort of buying into the anti-Blackness, the anti-Haitianness that has been perpetrated by these governments. And so I really want us to like not perpetuate those lies. The island of Haiti, inclusive of the Dominican Republic, is a place that is, like the rest of the Caribbean, more than 70% of discernible African descent. Whether you want to acknowledge that or not, the no islands in the Caribbean are places where there are people of majority European. Yep, there are Europeans, yes, but no islands in the Caribbean, whether they speak French, Portuguese, English, Spanish, whatever are those places. And so I really want to be clear about that, and also just to acknowledge that spreading that type of information is also what perpetuates these types of racialized divides and further perpetuates the issues of anti-Blackness and anti-Haitianness. So I really just want to like, we haven't taken that, but I don't know, what your objective is in sharing that, but you're just wrong.
But I won't say, so yes, and I think that maybe the DR was one of the Caribbean and South American nations that engaged in emblanquamiento. So like importing huge amounts of, not all of them. Haiti didn't have that.
No, oh, the Spanish, the Spanish territory.
And so, like Jibarismo, for example, I want to say that's important. Like, that's like white importing like white farmers, so to intentionally whiten their population, but it didn't work.
Yes, that's what it
right. So it didn't get rid of the Black people, but there were those attempts. But I think that we just need to be mindful of. These were plantations for much of their history. There are Black people there, even people that might not be as discernibly phenotypically Black as we are. They're still African, So yeah, I agree.
Okay, so but in thinking about that, I did want to ask a question, just from your perspective, from the organizational perspective, of what types of things we can be doing as folks who are, here in the U.S., elsewhere, who are wanting to continue to support the types of work that you all are doing in Compass, but also to generally sort of support the campaigns against the sort of dehumanization of Black and Haitian, Black Dominicans and Haitians in general, whether that be on the island or here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just wanted to briefly go back to the point you made, because I think it is just so important and so critical, and something I was wanting to I should have added in the type of perpetuation of this, what adds to it, this sentiment and this lack of understanding and knowledge of the history of the island. Like when I said earlier, like we can go back to 1492, but there's only so much time and space, and I will give resources so that you can do that history. If CBS Charisse has written about this, like Gerald Horn, there's so many people who have written about this and the history in that island, but more specifically, like current day, it is just it is really divisive. It's divisive, and it is hindering, and one of the biggest hindrances, because instead of talking about unifying and working in solidarity, we are choosing to spread misinformation and just these are just not facts and about every other day it comes up of the topic of I know Black, I Dominican, this rhetoric of that Dominicans don't know that they Black and all this stuff, when it's just not the truth. While yes, there are, and I know I've encountered people. I'm not saying that Dominicans don't say that. It is said. You type it up on the internet or TikTok or whatever, it has been said. But that is just not the truth. That is not the full truth. That is not the predominant truth. And again, to the spreading of why some of the solidarity work that has been done isn't out there is because of the dangerous attacks, or because of not having the platform to speak to this more broadly, and other communities and other diasporic communities, African communities coming together to address this. And so yes, I just that was a point that I'm not reading the comments, but thank you for pointing that out. And I just want to just speak to how dividing that is to the work being done. And something another PE that we have on, like, that Compass is developing and thinking and talking through, especially with other comrades, on addressing that, because that is the neoliberal front, the liberalism, the shedding of the liberalism, the educating of our community that we need to do. That's part of the work. But
I apologize here. I'm guilty, because I'd be quick to be like, Dominicans would be like, me no Black. Black got to flat iron the shit out of them curls, but you know Black. Because but you're right. It's not the totality. So my bad, but shit.
No, because obviously some of our experiences in the US can be overdetermined by everything. And I've had my own negative experiences in the DR and outside of the DR with, I told this story about this kid that I was working with in the DR, and because I was darker than him and I told him that I was Black, he cussed me the fuck out, because he was like, if you Black, that means I gotta be Black. Hey, I didn't say who you are. I just say who I am. But I do think that we do have to be fair to the fact that, like, there has been a long-standing political movement on the island and in the diaspora of folks who counter those narratives, and we have to be fair that both of those things exist. Just like we got reactionary Black folks, Negro.
I know African. I know Africans.
Yes, I just saw Dr. Gina's comment come up on the screen. Very much, there's work to do, and just recognizing the history of how the concept of race has been constructed in the Dominican Republic versus the U.S. and in different within this hemisphere. Yeah, very, very much work. But no, I mean, yes, the experience. This is one of why we are speaking to for why Compass is advocating and working to launch a travel advisory, because it is dangerous. Actually, Black people should not be traveling. People should not be traveling to the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
But also, like, the work is real. Like, the work is like, there's work to do, because I mean, before my beautiful locks, I was straightening the hair. I was straight, you know, like it is a shedding of this colonial indoctrination that we have been fed. And I'm not the only one from the US. People on the island, is work to do. There's work to do. And it is deep, I will say.
Yeah, it's the revolutionary culture we got to do.
We all go through we go through our white purge, colonial purge. The first time I were in natural was in undergrad. Got rid of all my white friends, was watching a lot of, you know.
I didn't go natural. I went straight for 1 year and then I went back.
Yeah, like I was a hotep for a number of years. Anywho, okay, so Steph, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but anything else you want to add, anything you wish you had been asked that you want to share with folks watching?
Yeah, I'm just going to share a few, our email, the Compass email, for folks to reach out to us if you'd like to know more, a few other emails, and statements, and also the statement that was created to, unfortunately, it is closed at the moment, but it is a statement denouncing Lordia's death as a state crime. And it's also other social media accounts, mainly Instagram accounts for people to follow, which is the Socialist Workers Movement in the DR, Haitians RD, Afro Dominicana, who is posts. And this is something like they are actively documenting this violence, and you'll see like 7 views or 7 like on the video. It's not being like, people are not seeing these, and you know, this is a whole other conversation on security and how we find other ways of instead of engaging with these mediocre, really not safe platforms of social media is another thing, you know, we're also trying to figure out. But yes,
I think the second part of what you posted, it got cut off. So
yeah, Lorgia. So from Lorgia down, it got cut off. We're just pasting it in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, I'm gonna try to keep it brief. I really will. But so just a few of the things that I'll end with is that the death of Loria Jean-Pierre, as well as the persecution, detention, and deportation of thousands of pregnant Haitian immigrant women, mothers, are actions that violate established national and international norms, laws, and protocols, and violate the most basic of human rights and lacerate human dignity. Likewise, the death and the campaign against pregnant women implemented by the Dominican government, didn't just start now, but since November 2021, includes other cases of maternal and newborn deaths that have not been made public, and constitute state crimes based on torture, persecution, and death, and carried out by a group of state institutions and agencies directly or indirectly. And I would like to tie that struggle connected here to the US and the war against birthing people, women in our bodies. This war impacts us all and is determined to criminalize and eradicate our existence. And from the work being done in Atlanta and other states facing anti-abortion bans, and the Dominican itself has passed laws banning abortion under any circumstances as well. These are interconnected struggles. What's happening there is it's similar. It is the same, and it is an attack on us. Not even to mention the ICE watch, the deportations, the detentions. We just had the Dominican Ministry of Police meet with the Salvadorian president. This is where they're actively deporting folks to El Salvador. So these are all interconnected, and I also wanted to speak to that the legacy of repeated U.S. intervention in the DR and also Haiti. They're set up by Trujillo, Balaguer, the coup Aristide in Haiti, all in alliance with the local comprador bourgeoisie. And I wanted to mention that Compas of the Diaspora, I said just a few years ago, 5 years ago, was born out of the anti-mining, anti-racism, and anti-imperialist struggle of Haiti, Quisqueya, and its diaspora. And we are folks with multi-tendency political orientations. And essentially, we began to gather and build into a formation, participating in and connecting with struggles from New York Strike MoMA, the George Floyd uprisings, local protests against Clinton's family, economic and agrarian violence against Haiti and its people. So, I mean, I've worked with. I would like to, uplift my comrades and my comrades from We're All Dominican. Like, this was a collective that was started in 2013 when the sentencing came out denationalizing people of Haitian ancestry. This work has been done for such a long time. Reconocido, Muda. There's so many different platforms who are actively doing this work. And so, yeah, I'm just really happy to be here and to have this platform. And I really do hope that folks reach out to us and continue to engage with us, and that we learn together, we struggle together, we fight together. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Steph. We really appreciate you being here. Obviously, we'll be in contact whenever you all have campaigns or information you want to get out. You have an open invitation to LSR, us and our 120 viewers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Listen,
Might take you up on that.
Well, I was thinking about this earlier in the conversation. I was just like, and maybe this is, a petty bourgeois problem, but I think about like how rooted in community I felt when I was still at home in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And because, those of us chasing jobs, gig economies, like we're moving to different places. And so even with all our concerns about, surveillance and all these things, these digital platforms are ways that we remain in community, and I think it's really important. And again, even if it was only 125 people, it's 125 more people than you before.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So thank you so much for your clarity and for your work, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. I was gonna just say we have a travel advisory coming out soon, and so we will definitely keep in contact. This is something that's very important. Just speaking more to the kind of work we're trying to do. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Stay your ass out of Punta Cana.
Yeah, don't be going. No, it's not cute. It's not cute. It's not nothing. It's not nothing.
Yeah. All right. Thank
you. Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Peace. Okay.
Denzel. Fucking Denzel gonna roll up at 6:25. Talk about, hey, you better have been at work or organizing.
So before we tap out, do you want to read those 4 comments or no from the last show?
Oh yeah. Oh y'all, we forgot to read the comments. We're almost done. We almost out of here, but we got some comments.
We just had 4.
Yeah.
So from our regular commenter, Free New Africa, we had 2 comments. Is there any way y'all can please do a segment on culture? And so actually we've been talking about this. We don't know when it's gonna happen, but it's something that we've been talking and thinking about a lot lately. And so yes, we will do that. And then the other comment that they made was Horn. This was in response to, I think, Sharice asking about like what was the origin of the Asiatic black man. And they said Horn said Asiatic black man was about the inspiration some of our people got from Japan being able to challenge the West prior to World War II.
Well, that was so Horn has a whole thing about it was the Battle of Adwa in 1896 and the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. I think that was part of like this Afro-Asian pre-World War II thing. I didn't know that's where it came from. So preach. All right. So Love I Am said, in relation to Traore and AI, Dr. Layla, you said what I've been thinking for a long time now. That is, I'm glad to be able to understand what Captain Traore is saying, as he is most often speaking in French, and I don't speak French, but Ibrahim, Burkina Faso, and the movement has our hearts and minds in rapture. That being said, whoever controls the AI, who is giving great control over what we think and do in terms of revolution. Is the AI being controlled by Ibrahim? Is it being controlled by trusted Pan-African groups? I'm not sure. So my thoughts are that as long as we cannot be sure, we can trust AI control groups. We're better off holding We're better off holding them in our trust for them and what is said by their AI at arm's distance with a grain of salt and with critical skepticism.
Yeah, because honestly, I'm not always certain that even when they do those English voiceovers that it actually tracks to whatever he was saying. So I don't know, like I would feel more comfortable with original audio and subtitles, and then I'd be looking in the comments for people who speak French and correcting shit. Like the AI makes it very uncomfortable. And then the last comment was from some 808s and just said thank you for the knowledge. So yeah, those are all the comments that we had from the last show.
Rao, wait, at the beginning of the show, you had wrote in the chat like people often don't know what gender you are. I also thought that you were, I'm not going to put you on blast, but I also thought that you were a different gender. I was very shocked when you came up and introduced yourself. So hi. You're right. People, I don't know why. Anyway.
I'm still mad that you didn't actually introduce yourself to me because I'm just like, I just be trying to place faces with names.
Yeah.
But anywho.
All right, y'all. So we are done for the day. We don't even know how many episodes we have left. We still got some things that we said we were going to do that we need to do. So we're just trucking along.
Yeah. I mean, every 2 weeks is a little more manageable than every week.
Did you all, nobody even asked about us being in the same place?
No, they said did. Somebody did at the beginning. Somebody said, I can't remember. In the very beginning, somebody did.
Okay.
Yeah. I have 17,000 pictures of me in that car from this last 4 days because I was very concerned because I hadn't seen her since the beginning of the year. It's been almost 6 months. I was like, oh, she's not gonna remember me, but she definitely did.
Yeah.
So,
she's just in a rough stage right now. She's 18 months, so she's just being 18 months. But is that what's her name on your earrings?
Oh, girl, I got these from Brazil randomly. It ain't nobody.
It looks a little bit like who's the actress? You know what I'm talking about?
Lupita.
Yeah.
It does kind of look like her, but no, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
All right. Bye. See you later. Thanks, guys.
But yes, not
what?
Okay, I don't know. I don't know.
Goodbye, guys. Thank you for tapping in.
All right, peace.
I would like a do-over so I can meet Dr. Brown next time.
Yes.
All right. Bye-bye.